Chapter 21:16. Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. With a new source power of space entering his body, it was inevitable that there would be struggle and conflict between the source powers. Fortunately, Ling Han was already accustomed to this kind of conflict. He would allow the 5 source powers to fight to their heart's content before he mediated for them, and acted as peacemaker. Even though the 9 heavens flame and Shenin source water had both been extracted from his body, their source was still engraved within him, and they didn't show any signs of wanting to move. After dealing with the spiritual void glass, it was time for him to obtain the purple spirit flames. This was slightly more difficult. This was because Ling Han couldn't absorb this source power. However, he still had to convince this source power of heaven and earth to leave with him. This was an extremely difficult task. Anyhow, he would give it a try. Since it was a source power of heaven and earth, it most likely had some form of sentience. Ling Han adjusted his direction, and arrived at the head of the cultivator. This was a sea of flames. Amid this sea of flames, there was a small dog happily jumping about. The purple spirit flames had actually taken the form of a dog. Had it developed intelligence and become a unique life form? It's only taken the preliminary step of becoming a unique and independent individual. However, it's still a long way off becoming a genuine life form, Small Tower said. In other words, this small dog only has the intelligence of a 2 to 3-year-old child? Ling Han murmured. I can trick it then. He stopped near the sea of flames, saying, Adorable puppy, come over here. Let me have a closer look. Because he was only a divine sense at this moment, his speech was naturally transmitted through his divine sense as well. There was no problem communicating with the dog. Thus, the small dog immediately looked over, cocking its head in hesitation. It's going to be very fun, Ling Han continued with his shady behavior. The small dog took a few steps over before stopping again. It wore an expression of hesitation as it gazed at Ling Han. Come on, come over here. If Ling Han's physical body were here, he would definitely retrieve all kinds of food from the Black Tower to entice the small dog. Now, however, he could only use words to trick it. The small dog stopped and started, and only after a long time did it finally reach the edge of the sea of flames. After arriving here, however, it was extremely reluctant to take another step. Come on, come over here. I also own a large black dog, and you guys might even be acquainted with each other, Ling Han continued. The small dog merely cocked its head as it looked at him. It didn't bark, and it didn't take another step forward, either. Don't be afraid, come on over, Ling Han said as he started to step back. When he retreated a fair distance, the small dog started to become restless. It continued to pace back and forth, occasionally stopping to glance at Ling Han. It was seemingly indecisive about whether it should head over or not. If you don't come now, there won't be another chance, Ling Han said as he continued to retreat. The small dog finally made up its mind, suddenly spreading its legs and sprinting toward Ling Han. Pang! It rammed into Ling Han, causing his mind to shudder. Meanwhile, his divine sense had already been pushed out from the cultivator's body. A ball of flames followed after it, and it crashed toward Ling Han's body. However, Ling Han naturally wouldn't absorb this source power of heaven and earth. Small Tower! He immediately shouted in his mind. Are you sure? Small Tower asked. It knew what Ling Han was thinking. I'm certain, Ling Han answered without hesitation. Wang! A black tower instantly materialized, radiating with a paramount aura. It was as if this tower was heaven and earth. This was a unique existence among heaven and earth. It was the Tower of 3 Realms. The ball of flames instantly ground to a halt. Even though this was only a ball of flames, Ling Han could still feel some kind of willpower emanating from it. It was showing respect and apprehension toward the Black Tower. The Black Tower expanded slightly as it engulfed the ball of flames. With a whoosh, it then vanished as it returned to Ling Han's body. This was an extremely risky action. The Tower of 3 Realms was far too powerful, and it had even transcended the level of 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Thus, its appearance in the world would definitely trigger shockwaves among heaven and earth. Heavenly venerates could easily sense these disturbances. Ling Han only dared to do this because this was in the void. There existed boundless chaotic winds, and they could greatly muffle the shock waves caused by the Tower of 3 Realms. there was a 90% chance that he could avoid the detection of heavenly venerates. If this were an ordinary environment, unless Small Tower could suppress the aura of the Black Tower, Ling Han definitely wouldn't dare to act so rashly. However, since he had a 90% chance of avoiding detection, he was willing to take a gamble. Everything remained calm. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. If a heavenly venerate truly descended, the situation would be futile even if the Black Tower unleashed its full might. "You're wrong," Small Tower said with pride. "If I face them head-on, I'll naturally be no match for them. However, helping you flee will be no problem at all. It's just that you'll become a target of those old folks, and you won't need to think about leaving the Black Tower anymore. Otherwise, your only fate would be death." Ling Han nodded in understanding. If he didn't need to use the Black Tower, it was best that he didn't use it. "Let's go, it's time to look for the next source power of heaven and earth." Small Tower continued to guide him. After a day, they discovered a large boulder. "Is there a celestial king buried underneath?" Ling Han asked. "Wrong. This is the celestial king." Small Tower replied with a sneer. "Ha! It's a rock?" "This is the Azure Rock Celestial King, who was an ordinary rock before attaining Tao. Because he was sat on top of Bai. During his seclusion, he gained awareness and developed intelligence. In the end, he even became a celestial king," Small Tower said. Because he attained Tao as a rock, it was also very easy for him to receive acknowledgement from the source power of Earth. As such, he obtained the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. Ling Han raised his hands and asked, "Hang on, you said the Azure Rock Celestial King was sat on top of by whom during their cultivation?" "Fool, we can't speak his name. This person is far too powerful, so speaking his name will instantly grab his attention. Do you want to die?" Small Tower spoke to Ling Han as if he were a retard. "Is he one of the 3 heavenly venerates?" Ling Han asked. Small Tower didn't ridicule him this time. Ling Han was truly curious. Just who were these 3 heavenly venerates? However, if he asked, Small Tower would definitely say that he couldn't speak their names or titles. Otherwise, this would grab their attention. With a single thought, these heavenly venerates might even materialize before them. At that time, Ling Han would have no option but to retreat inside the Black Tower and spend the remainder of his life fleeing. Ling Han pushed aside his curiosity. There were more important matters to deal with at this moment. Within this rock was a source power of heaven and earth. This was something he dearly needed right now. He sat down and started to channel the indestructible heaven scroll, attracting the source power of earth inside the rock. The indestructible heaven scroll was far too powerful, being a cultivation technique created by a heavenly venerate, so it possessed a strong ability to attract source powers of heaven and earth. Thus, it wasn't long before the rock started to glow. Thump, thump, thump. It was as if the rock possessed life, and it was as if it possessed a heart that was beating. "Hurry, come over here." Ling Han didn't have much time. The battle between the Black Dragon King, the Eternal Celestial King, and Xiao Gu might end at any moment, and it was possible that the Black Dragon King might appear before him at any time. If that happened, he would either have to retreat inside the Black Tower or be killed. In any case, he would lose the chance to obtain this source power of heaven and earth. 3 days passed, and the entire rock was now glowing. It then became transparent, revealing a 5-colored block of soil in its center. This block of soil continued to transform into all kinds of shapes and figures. Pa! The rock suddenly split apart, and the 5-colored block of soil vigorously dashed into the air before flying toward Ling Han. Pooh! The block of 5-colored soil slammed into Ling Han's head before fusing into his body. Boom! Violent waves instantly surged through Ling Han's dantian. The source powers were fighting against each other again, trying to conquer more land for themselves. Fine. He would continue to act as a peacemaker. Chapter 21:17. My hands are getting tired from this rich harvest. Because he already had a wealth of previous experience, Ling Han was able to easily resolve the conflict between the 6 source powers. They each settled in an area of his dantian. Anyhow, he had finally obtained a source power of each of the 5 elements. His great clash of source powers could now unleash its full might. Stop congratulating yourself, hurry up and get a move on, Small Tower said in impatience. Ling Han nodded in reply. He had no time to investigate the uses of the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin soil as he stood up to leave. Several hours later, they arrived on the bank of a wide river. This was an extraordinary river, in that its contents weren't water. Instead, it was filled with tumultuous lightning. It was obvious that this led to a source power of lightning. Ling Han involuntarily thought of the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. At that time, he had followed a river of lightning before discovering the resting place of his divine sense. How was he doing now? Had he recovered his immortal palace tier cultivation? It would be extremely difficult for him to exact revenge, right? After all, he had seemingly offended an ascending origin tier elite. Regardless of how prodigious the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire was, it would still take him millions of years to reach the ascending origin tier, right? This was taking into account the fact that he was already a prodigy among prodigies. Ling Han rid himself of these random thoughts. The source power of lightning was another source power that he didn't possess. If he obtained it, he would once again grow significantly more powerful. Has anyone obtained 9 source powers before? He suddenly asked in curiosity. Yes. Small Tower replied without any hesitation. Who? The original owner of the Black Tower, Small Tower replied. There was a hint of melancholy in his voice. Ling Han was instantly rendered speechless. It was largely because he practiced the indestructible heaven scroll that he was able to obtain 6 source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if he relied on himself, perhaps he couldn't even obtain a single source power. In comparison, the gulf between him and the original owner of the Black Tower was extremely evident. Don't lose heart, Small Tower said. The heavenly venerate was able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth simply because he severed his own cultivation after reaching the 9th heaven. Before starting his new life, he had already created the indestructible heaven scroll. Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. As it turned out, Ji Wuming wasn't the only 9th heaven celestial king to sever his own cultivation. However, this also made him feel much better. At the very least, that person also hadn't been able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth from the very start. He strode forward, and it wasn't long before he reached the end of the lightning river. A pool of lightning appeared before him, and within it were arcs of crackling blue lightning liquid. Limitless lightning. Small Tower said. Same old rules. Ling Han asked. Ling Han started to absorb the source power. With the indestructible heaven scroll, absorbing source powers of heaven and earth was no difficult task. The problem right now was time. Ling Han didn't have much time to waste. After 9 entire days, Ling Han finally managed to arouse and absorb this source power of heaven and earth. My first 4 source powers of heaven and earth all took exorbitant effort to obtain. Now, however, it's as if I can obtain them with a nod of my head. Say, this comparison makes me feel depressed, Ling Han said with emotion. Stop acting pitiful after you've received a benefit. Small Tower scolded. Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. Anyhow, if one didn't need to, who would want to spend an exorbitant amount of effort? However, things were genuinely far too easy now. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Following the guidance of Small Tower, he started to search for the 5th source power of heaven and earth. After walking for a short while, Ling Han came to a stop. There was a corpse before him. It was extremely normal to come across corpses here. After all, this was an ancient battlefield, so it would be strange if there was no corpse. However, this corpse was extremely peculiar. Even though it was humanoid, its features were extremely strange. It had a pair of cow hooves, and its body was also pitch black and covered in scales. There was a pair of thin cicada wings on its back, and its gigantic eyes almost took up half of its face. Meanwhile, its mouth was as thin and long as the mouth of a mosquito, and it was already beyond what could be called a mouth. Calling it an arthropod's mouthpart would be more fitting. Ling Han had come across beings from numerous races before. Regarding those that could shapeshift, even though they would maintain some features of their race, he definitely hadn't come across anything like this before. This is an elite from the foreign realm, Small Tower suddenly said. Humans from the foreign realm look like this. So ugly, Ling Han remarked. This is an 18th Lotus Elite. In order to stop him, our realm dispatched 4 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. However, even so, one of the Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings was still killed, Small Tower said. Simply to stop him? Ling Han asked with a solemn expression. The difficulty of stopping an elite and killing an elite was completely different. If even stopping a person required 4 elites of an equivalent level, especially paramount beings such as Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, just how powerful were the elites from the foreign realm? Yes, simply to stop him, Small Tower replied in a stern voice. You can also appreciate the grave nature of this battle now, right? Is this foreign elite especially powerful, or are they all this powerful? They're all this powerful. Ling Han was genuinely stunned upon hearing this. Those who could become Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings were all top-notch prodigies. Even if there was a gap in abilities between them, this gap shouldn't be large. However, any random elite from the foreign realm could rival 4 elites from the celestial realm. It was no wonder that the celestial realm could only choose to defend, and not counterattack. It was no wonder that they couldn't comprehensively defeat the storm of darkness. Moreover, this is taking into account the fact that the elites from the foreign realm experience suppression from our heaven and earth after entering the celestial realm. Otherwise, they'll be even more powerful. Small Tower revealed an even more brutal fact. Thank heavens. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Thank heavens the celestial realm hadn't counterattacked. Otherwise, they would have faced a one-sided massacre. The ancient realm has been split into 2. The immortal realm and the netherworld. Is this because of the foreign realm? Ling Han suddenly recalled this question that had bothered him for a long time. Yes, but also no, Small Tower replied. This was a confusing answer. Fuck. If it is, then it is. If it isn't, then it isn't. What kind of answer is this? The ancient realm being split into 2 was indeed related to the invasion of the foreign realm. However, that was only a trigger. The fundamental reason was still related to the celestial realm itself, Small Tower explained. What reason is that? Ling Han asked. This involves heavenly venerates, so it's best that you don't ask, Small Tower replied. It refused to answer Ling Han's question. Related to heavenly venerates again. However, this made sense. If not heavenly venerates who had transcended the regulations of heaven and earth, who else could split the ancient realm into 2? Moreover, only at the command of heavenly venerates would the entire celestial realm obey and follow. This was why no one dared to bring those from the ancient realm into the celestial realm. However, there was something else that Ling Han was curious about. What was the reason for this? They were already paramount heavenly venerates, so how could they be afraid of a few people ascending from the ancient realm? However, this involved those 3 old monsters, so Small Tower definitely wouldn't indulge his curiosity. Otherwise, if they dared to speak the name or title of those 3 heavenly venerates, a wisp of their awareness would descend. At that time, things would truly become troublesome. Forget about it. Let's obtain the source powers of heaven and earth first. Ling Han continued to advance. 3 days later, he obtained the 5th source power of heaven and earth, the heavenly sun black gold. However, it was a shame that he already had no need for this source power. He placed it inside the black tower, and this process made him involuntarily tense up. He was afraid of attracting the attention of those 3 old monsters. Alright, even if there are more source powers of heaven and earth that you can't use, you can't place them inside the black tower anymore. Even though there's a 90% chance that it won't be discovered, the more risks you take, the higher the chance of being discovered, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. It prevented Ling Han from taking any further risks. Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. The Empress and Hu Niu could both obtain a source power of heaven and earth. In any case, they couldn't use a source power of heaven and earth to act as their divided soul anymore. As such, having one more or one less wouldn't make too much difference. There's still a source power of slaughter ahead. Chapter 21:18. Soaring Sword Qi. In the past, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have imagined that the source power of slaughter was actually a blade of grass. Slaughter is simply a type of regulation. It possesses no physical manifestation, so when the original source power of slaughter shattered, its power of regulations gathered on this blade of grass, allowing it to remain indestructible through several epochs. In other words, this blade of grass has already become the new source power of heaven and earth, Small Tower said. Ling Han looked at the blade of grass. It was only 3 inches tall, and it only had 4 leaves, each of which was emerald green and shaped like a sword. No matter how he looked at it, this didn't look like a peculiar blade of grass that possessed the source power of slaughter. Swoosh! A gust of mountain wind raced past, causing the leaves to slightly shudder. Blades of sword chi instantly formed before slashing into the void. A terrifying sight ensued. A fissure was brutally torn in the air, and the chaotic winds were forcefully dragged to a halt. The fissure was astonishingly large. Ling Han's eyes bulged in disbelief. This was the source power of slaughter, a source power that was filled with destruction and violence. Hurry up and absorb it. The Black Dragon King has left numerous formations in the surroundings, weakening the resistance of the source power of slaughter. If we leave it alone, she'll be able to absorb it within 100,000 years, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. Ling Han nodded in reply, and he hurriedly started to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This time, however, the indestructible Heaven Scroll surprisingly failed to work. The blade of grass remained unresponsive to Ling Han's approaches. What's going on? The regulation of slaughter hasn't been fused into the indestructible Heaven Scroll, Small Tower explained. By the looks of it, you'll have to come up with something by yourself. Ling Han was slightly disappointed by this result. However, a powerful urge quickly overtook him. If he could obtain this source power of slaughter with his own abilities, that would be the best acknowledgement of his power. To obtain a source power of heaven and earth as a dividing soul tier cultivator? Perhaps no one could achieve this. Even if they could, they would most likely require help from their elders. Ling Han released his thoughts to communicate with the blade of grass. The greatest difference between him and the Black Dragon King was a fundamental one. The Black Dragon King was now practicing the cultivation system of the foreign realm. In a fundamental sense, she no longer belonged to this realm. Thus, source powers of heaven and earth would also feel innate resistance and disgust toward her. They definitely wouldn't show intimacy toward her. Thus, the Black Dragon King had no option but to use formations which would slowly weaken the resistance of these source powers over time. Her abilities were astonishing, and add to that her 7th heaven cultivation, and it was entirely possible that she could succeed. Now that Ling Han had arrived, however, she had unwittingly paved the way for him. Indeed, Ling Han's cultivation was far inferior to that of the Black Dragon King. However, he was genuinely a being from the celestial realm. If the source power were forced to make a choice, would it choose a mortal enemy or an unfamiliar relative? Thus, Ling Han had faced few obstacles when obtaining the previous few source powers of heaven and earth. This was in part thanks to the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and in part thanks to the preparations made by the Black Dragon King. However, if the Black Dragon King learned of this, she certainly wouldn't take credit with a smile on her face. Instead, she would go wild with rage. Her hard work of tens of billions of years, it had all been stolen by a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Thus, the difficulty of obtaining this source power of slaughter was also several times smaller than it should have been. Otherwise, a dividing soul tier cultivator daring to obtain the source power of slaughter? A single burst of sword chi would slash them into smithereens. Since this was the source power of slaughter, he would try to attract it with his fighting spirit. Ling Han unleashed his raging fighting spirit. This was an aura that wouldn't yield even before powerful enemies. So what if his opponent was Ji Wuming, the reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king? He was filled with fighting spirit, and he was brimming with confidence that he could one day defeat this opponent. He was burning with passion, and his fighting spirit became something tangible. Like sabers, like spears, like swords, and like fists, his fighting spirit roared like the drums of battle. After a long time, the blade of grass finally swayed slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Its 4 leaves shuddered, unleashing 4 bursts of powerful sword chi. Pang, pang, pang. A large portion of the mountain wall was instantly sliced off. Ling Han was astounded by this sight. He had personally witnessed the strength of this valley, yet the attack from the source power of slaughter made the mountain wall look like nothing but jelly. Its destructive power was absolutely terrifying. At the same time, this also made him feel even more enticed. He practiced the regulation of slaughter, But how could this compare to the source power of slaughter? If he obtained it, his battle prowess would rise by a significant amount. Ji Wuming. There was still a ball of unyielding passion in his heart. So what if he had reincarnated from a ninth heaven celestial king? As long as he put in the hard work, he could definitely overcome the gulf between them and defeat this opponent. Swoosh! The blade of grass continued to sway, sending bursts of sword chi into the surroundings. Some blade of sword chi scraped past Ling Han's face, only a hair away from cutting into him. However, Ling Han remained as still as a mountain. He didn't evade. In fact, it was fortunate that he remained unmoving. Otherwise, if he suddenly moved, it would perhaps result in him being struck by the bursts of powerful sword chi. With the terrifying power of the source power of slaughter, being struck by the sword chi would definitely obliterate his divine sense in an instant. Ling Han understood that this was a test from the source power of slaughter. It wanted to determine whether he was worth following. This was a good development. After all, if the source power didn't even want to test him, how could he hope to ever obtain it? He remained calm and composed, simply unleashing his blazing fighting spirit. He wanted to let the source power of slaughter know that if it followed him, it could battle to its heart's content. Even though the source power of slaughter was named as such, slaughter wasn't the main substance of this source power. Instead, it was battle. It would evolve through battle, and this evolution would allow it to slay elites. Boom! Ling Han's fighting spirit was unbounded and scorching, and it was almost about to condense into something tangible. In terms of fighting spirit alone, he was truly no inferior to any celestial king. This was an unyielding demeanor that he had developed as someone who had fought his way up from a small world. What did it matter even if his opponent were a heavenly venerate? Ling Han didn't fear them at all. He had the conviction and confidence that he could definitely defeat them in the future. The blade of grass started to sway more and more, filling the sky with blades of sword chi. It was as if it wanted to obliterate the entire valley. Brat, you dare? There was a shrill scream as a black dragon swooped over from the distance. Pang pang pang. It unleashed its might as it soared over, reducing the surrounding mountain walls into ashes. The Black Dragon King had come. The Eternal Celestial King had definitely been laid to a final rest, returning to ashes and dust. However, what about Xiao Gu? Ling Han couldn't help but feel anxious as he thought about this. He had always been caring toward his friends. Now that the Black Dragon King was charging over without Xiao Gu, he couldn't help but feel uneasy and worried for Xiao Gu. However, with the dire situation that he was in now, it was actually himself that he needed to worry about the most. The Black Dragon King was charging over. Wang! She made a slashing motion with her claw, and a colossal dragon claw bore down from the sky. To say nothing of one Ling Han, even tens of thousands of him would be killed by this attack. Was he going to fall at the final hurdle? Right at this moment, however, the blade of grass suddenly swayed slightly. Whoosh! A burst of brilliant sword chi slashed up at the dragon claw. Pooh! As the burst of sword chi slashed past, the colossal dragon claw was instantly sliced into two. Ling Han was delighted upon seeing this. He hadn't imagined that the source power of slaughter would actually save him. Xiao! The blade of grass suddenly uprooted itself from the ground, revealing its roots that were less than 1 inch long. These roots were as clear as crystal, and they possessed some kind of indescribable beauty. The blade of grass shot toward Ling Han. Although it had blocked an attack of the Black Dragon King, that was because the Black Dragon King had unleashed the attack from extremely far away. Moreover, she also hadn't unleashed her full power. After all, did she need to unleash her full power to kill a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? For her next attack, however, the Black Dragon King would definitely unleash her full power. It would definitely be unblockable. The source power had still been hesitant at first, unsure of whether it should follow Ling Han or not. Now that it was being pressured by the Black Dragon King, however, it immediately abandoned its hesitation, and directly leaped at Ling Han. Brat, if you dare to absorb the source power of slaughter, I'll make you experience the worst torture imaginable, the Black Dragon King roared. A mighty celestial king was actually threatening a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? This was inconceivable, yet it was indeed happening at this moment. However, how could Ling Han pay any heed to her? He relaxed his body and awaited the arrival of the blade of grass. Xiao! The blade of grass vanished with a flash, fusing into Ling Han's forehead. Chapter 21:19. Way to leave. Damn! Damn! The Black Dragon King's fury incinerated the heavens, her killing intent blazing like an ocean. She sent out another palm strike at Ling Han. Yaya! A familiar voice rang out. Xiao Gu appeared, but this time, Xiao Gu was no longer in human form, but rather was a bone that was diffused in celestial qi. Practically ignoring all rules of space, he appeared instantly in front of Ling Han. Boom! The Black Dragon King's strike descended. Xiao Gu was instantly sent flying. If he was alone, he was considerably inferior to the Black Dragon King, and would not be qualified to block the Black Dragon King's strike. However, his original body was as tough as divine metal, and even after sustaining a blow from the Black Dragon King, he was still undamaged. A frightening storm of energy surged past. This was the furious blow venting the anger of a seventh heaven celestial king. Long black-colored energy was surging through the entire valley violently, and turning into an ocean. The power of regulation that did not belong to this realm was flaring, but because it could not achieve resonance and be replenished by the regulations of heaven and earth, it was already disappearing at an overwhelmingly fast rate. To the heaven and earth, this kind of energy, this kind of regulations was a disease. Thus, the body would heal itself as soon as possible, and erase this kind of energy and regulations. Where is he? Black Dragon King's figure descended, but there was no further trace of Ling Han in the valley. He has definitely not been crushed, but has rather hidden into a spatial god tool. She had seen very clearly. In the instant the storm of energy attacked him, Ling Han's figure had disappeared in a flash. In that case, he had to have entered into a spatial god tool. However, what kind of spatial god tool could remain unharmed after sustaining a blow from her? A celestial king tool? An expression of confusion appeared on her face. Wherever this brat is, I must find him. He actually retrieved 6 source powers of heaven and earth. There are only a total of 9 here. Damn it, he is really despicable. The Black Dragon King stomped her foot. She had thought that only the Eternal Celestial King and Xiao Gu were her greatest foes. She had not imagined that the one to really stab her in the back was what was only an ant in her eyes. Don't let me find you, or I will let you know what hell on earth means. She swore harshly, her divine sense spreading out, and beginning to search for Ling Han all over the world. Could she find Ling Han? The answer was negative. It was not that the Black Tower's concealment ability was very strong, but rather that Ling Han was no longer on this mainland. After being struck by the Black Dragon King, the Black Tower had soared to the skies with all the other dirt and dust. Then, it was swept into the vacuum, and instantly blown away by the storm of energy. Very soon, it became unknown how far away it had been swept away. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han sprawled out on the ground, panting harshly. Just now, it had really been extremely dangerous. If it were not the source power of Slaughter and Xiao Gu having each blocking a blow for him, he probably would not have had any time to enter into the Black Tower. Too dangerous, he concluded. If he had to bet his life on the chances of having someone else save him, what if there came a day that no one came to save him? However, if I had not taken the risk at that time, I would not have been able to retrieve the source power of Slaughter. There was no other alternative, he continued. I can still use Rising from the Ashes, and have the capital to die once. He laid down this matter first, and began to inspect himself. There were a total of 8 source powers. He was only 1 more source power away from the maximum limit of 9. It had seemed to be an incredibly difficult task to manifest 9 divided souls at Dividing Soul Tier, and would possibly need an extensive time of tens of billions or hundreds of billions of years to accomplish, but he had not thought that he would be able to retrieve a total of 4 source powers of heaven and earth in one go. To be frank, I really have to thank that vicious bear gang leader. Additionally, for a daughter-in-law to bring so much good fortune even to her father-in-law, she would definitely bring even more good fortune to my son. This daughter-in-law definitely cannot be missed. Still, how am I supposed to leave? This was vacuum. The violent energy here could even destroy ascending origin tier elites. No matter how strong Ling Han's physique was, There was no way it had reached ascending origin tier. In that case, it would only be committing suicide if he left. Then what was he to do? Just stay inside the Black Tower, right until he cultivated all the way to Celestial King tier. That was impossible. To manifest his Earth Soul and Heaven Soul, he would have to go to a specific location. It was the same for Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier. If he stayed inside the Black Tower, he would only be stuck at Een Soul tier for his whole life, and then as time passed, he would be plagued by the Immortal's Tribulation. There would eventually come a day when the Immortal's Tribulation strengthened to an extent where his lifespan would be severed. Small Tower, is there any way out? Ling Han asked. There are two options, Small Tower answered in a very calm tone. There were actually as many as two options. Tell me about it. First, I let the Black Tower release its might, and it would naturally be a piece of cake to tear open a rip in space and return to the celestial realm, Small Tower said. However, if that were to happen, those old monsters would definitely discover my existence. Ling Han sighed. Though this could immediately solve the problem, the new problem that would be caused seemed to be even more troublesome, so he could only skip this option. Then what's the second choice? You can use the source powers of the 5 elements to protect yourself, and would be able to resist the space storm for an extremely short time. Then you can use the great clash of source powers, and there is a chance that you can break out of this space, Small Tower said. Then that's decided. Ling Han did not want to waste any more time, and immediately sat down in a cross-legged position, beginning to deal with the source powers of heaven and earth inside his body. Firstly, it was a very migraine-inducing matter to have 8 different source powers to get along well. Each and every source power wanted to monopolize the world inside Ling Han's Dantian. This naturally needed Ling Han to play mediator. And it just so happened that all of them were bosses. If any one of them left Ling Han's main body, they would have the ability to kill him instantly. Thus, Ling Han could only harmonize them, and could not suppress them by force. This made him feel very depressed. Thankfully, he had dealt with all 8 of these source powers of heaven and earth within 7,000 years, and because time passed swiftly inside the Black Tower, he had actually only used 7 years in real time. Let's try out the defense of source powers first, Ling Han mumbled to himself. The 5 elements supported and subdued each other, and could cause a burst of terrifying destructive power. At the same time, they could also form a boundless defense through their mutual support. He began experimenting. Even if time passed at an accelerated pace inside the Black Tower, he had still used up what would equate to 4,000 years in real time to finally smoothen out the power of the 5 elements so that they could form Celestial King tier defense for a very short period of time. This time was so short that it was practically non-existent. In an actual battle, it would be too ineffective because when the attack of an elite shot over, it was impossible that it would surge over completely in a single instant. Then, what was the point of blocking the attack for an instant? However, it was of great help in solving his present dilemma because Ling Han could control when he would sustain the barrage of the storm in the vacuum. He was an outrageously bold man, and he rushed out of the Black Tower without the slightest hesitation. Boom! The violent storm of energy immediately assaulted him. With a bang, Ling Han immediately retreated back into the Black Tower. At least half of all the bones in his body were broken, his face as pale as paper. Almost half his life was gone. Fuck, the time it can be maintained is even shorter than I imagined. When I exited and came back in, I have still been grazed by the storm of energy, and almost died. Ling Han felt lingering fear. Even if he could use rising from the ashes, to revive in vacuum was actually just committing suicide again. No, I have to make it that the time it can be maintained would be extended just a bit more. For the sake of this bit of additional time, Ling Han spent another 3,000 years in real time. One attempt after another, and though he was still injured every time, the extent of his injuries was becoming lighter. Finally, one day, he did not suffer the slightest injury when he exited and re-entered. All right, now it's only the great clash of source powers. Time to see if it can tear a rip in vacuum. Chapter 21-20. Opening the Passage. Ling Han entered a long period of seclusion once more. Though he had mastered the great clash of source powers of 4 source powers, to have 5 source powers clash was not something as simple as just adding another into the equation. Instead, He had to form a relation of mutual interaction with the other 4 source powers. There were too many aspects that he had to attend to at the same time. In the process of his attempts, Ling Han killed himself another 3 times. Thankfully, he had learned his lesson. After each time he used Rising from the Ashes, he would wait until this ability recovered to continue testing out dangerous actions. He would not waste the other time, either. He was studying the 4 new source powers, and his battle prowess improved further. In fact, he had a feeling that he would be able to match Ji Wuming even without using the Great Clash of Source Powers. This was not impossible, because Ji Wuming also had a powerful move to burst his battle prowess. Ling Han was close to obtaining all 9 source powers of heaven and earth, and if this still did not allow his usual battle prowess to catch up to Ji Wuming's, it would really be too unjust. After all, a 9th heaven celestial king would also have to break the limits of his own cultivation level. It was only that he would be able to use more power of regulations. 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. Ling Han had finally completed cultivating the new Great Clash of Source Powers. He exited the Black Tower, and began to barrage the vacuum. Pang! He spread out the shield of source power, and then burst out with a frightening strike. Boom! When this landed on the vacuum, it was like a small pebble being tossed into a great river. The splash created was practically negligible. No, the power is too weak. Again. Ling Han continued his seclusion, and 70 years later, he made another attempt. There's some improvement, but still too weak. Again. The power's stronger again, but still considerably lacking. Again. 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 Another 3,000 years passed, and Ling Han had already forgotten the matter of leaving the vacuum. Instead, he had placed all his focus and energy on the matter of the Great Clash of Source Powers. The power of this secret technique had been developed to a brand new height at his hand. The clash of 4 source powers in the past was practically negligible compared to this. 5 elements perfected, not only could it match time, space and other regulations, it could even far surpass them. After all, this was 5 types of regulations of heaven and earth. Boom! Ling Han came out to barrage the vacuum as per usual, testing out the might of the Great Clash of Source Powers. He had not thought that a massive change would happen this time round. The vacuum split apart, and a passage was revealed. Ha! Ling Han was startled. This passage only appeared for an instant. His power was too weak. The space passage he created was too unstable, and could only be maintained for an instant. Success! Ling Han had already returned to the Black Tower. He had realized that he had successfully ripped open the void at this moment, and could return to the celestial realm. He laughed loudly, and then exited the Black Tower with a leap once more, and blasted out his strongest attack. The void split apart again, and a passage was revealed. Without the slightest hesitation, he rushed inside. Boom! His whole body shook madly, and he had not gotten his wits back yet when a bright sky appeared suddenly ahead of him. Bang! He dropped down from the skies, crashing heavily into the ground. He felt like even his internal organs were trembling wildly, and felt incredibly horrible. When he had entered into the vacuum, he had been protected by Lu Herong, but now he himself had traversed the vacuum. This kind of feeling was really too terrible. Deity. Demon. The voices of a few kids rang out in Ling Han's ear. He forced himself to open his eyes, and saw 4 small faces appear above him. They were all surveying him with great curiosity. When they saw Ling Han's eyes open, these 4 kids all got a shock, and hurriedly ducked their heads back in. Ling Han struggled to get to his feet. It was enough to experience this kind of feeling once. He had no wish to experience it a second time. He straightened up, and surveyed his surroundings. He was at the head of a small village. There was a massive path of limestone here, and in the middle there was a well, which was also built from limestone, and it actually had a soft luster to it just like limestone. Where is this place? Ling Han asked the 4 children. The 4 kids shook their heads simultaneously, staying very much on guard against him. Ling Han smiled, and took out some sweets from the Black Tower. With Hu Niu by his side, he definitely did not lack snacks. I will give this to whoever tells me. This is Great Wong Village, the 4 kids answered at the same time. Ling Han laughed loudly and split the sweets among the 4 children. Then he asked, "Do you know which heavenly realm this is?" The difficulty level of this question was slightly too high for the 4 children, and the 4 kids all shook their heads dumbly. "What is the nearest city called?" They still shook their heads. Forget it. He had best find it on his own. Hopefully, he had not been swept back into the Eastern Celestial Realm. This was not impossible. The vacuum and the Celestial Realm did not correspond to one another. It was possible that he entered from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and after traveling for a while and coming back out, he would have already arrived in the Western Celestial Realm. However, this kind of journey did not have any accuracy at all, and even a celestial king could not possibly traverse the void for a journey. Ling Han soothed his wildly trembling internal organs, and then leaped up, moving his limbs slightly. He felt like he was filled with explosive power. More than 10,000 years had passed in real time, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, more than 10 million years had passed. He had long since cultivated Ean's soul tier to the pinnacle. Thus, he decided to first break through to Earth Soul, and then head to the Rock Palace. He entered the village, and found some elders of the village to ask around. The adult men had all entered the mountains for hunting, while the women were gathering wild fruits in the woods. There were only elderly and children in this village until evening time. "The nearest city here is called Great Cloud City," an old man said. "I have been there in my youth. Young man, that really is a prosperous place. I really had an impulse not to return here years ago, but for the sake of my wife and kids, I still gritted my teeth and came back." Ling Han smiled slightly. Even if they did not cultivate, the people of the Celestial Realm had an extremely long lifespan. Usually it would be around 500 years, and this old man had been alive for more than 450 years, and had really reached the end of his years. But compared to Ling Han, the old man would only be the junior of a junior. Going by real time, Ling Han had been alive for more than 10,000 years, and added with the time accelerations effects, he was already an old monster that had been alive for over 10 million years. Being called a young man by someone who had only been alive for over 450 years, Ling Han felt slightly amused. Without his knowing, he had already passed a very long time. If you're heading to Great Cloud City, you should head east after you exit the village. You have to walk a total of 3 years to be able to reach there, the old man continued, and then patted Ling Han's shoulder. "Young man, you had best just settle down here. You look quite talented, so it would not be difficult to find a wife." Ling Han smiled, and drew out an alchemical pill, which he laid down. To him, it was not valuable, but for mortals, it was incredibly precious. It could reforge the old man's body, and from now on, he would be strong and healthy. It would be no difficult task to continue living for another 200 years. Actually, this was not an alchemical pill to increase one's lifespan, so its effects were not very good. However, for a mortal, this was already enough. "Old man, take care." Ling Han stood up, and walked out of the old man's thatched cottage. He had just taken a step when he heard a powerful tremor sound from the earth. It was not an earthquake, but rather something created by some creature stomping on the ground. He paused slightly. Only a while later, he saw over a dozen handsome horses gallop over from the distance, directly barging into the village. These horses were not any mortal breed, but had a sliver of the bloodline of the dragon tribe. Their hooves were covered with dragon scales, and they appeared very majestic and mighty. When these horses barged in, their speed actually did not slow down. There were 2 children presently playing around in the middle of the path, and they were instantly scared silly. In just a moment, they would be run over. Chapter 21-21. Going to the Lu clan. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a groan. Though it was only a glance, he had seen very clearly that there were a total of 17 horses, and there was a person riding on every single horse. They were all men, and they all had a strong air of arrogance in their expressions. "There's a kid standing in the path, and not only do you people not pull on the reins to stop the horses, you don't even slow down." Instantly, fury soared up in Ling Han. With a flash, he had already appeared in front of those 2 children, standing as proud as a mountain. Pang, 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 pang. These riders had absolutely no intention of pulling on the reins, and thus naturally crashed directly into him. When the first horse collided with him, how could it possibly send Ling Han flying? Instantly, the front hooves of the horse stumbled, and the back hooves soared, completely overturned from the crash. The horses behind could not brake in time at all, and crashed right into the horse in front of them. This caused a chain of horse accidents. In an instant, 7 horses had completely crashed into each other. Some had even broken their necks, twitching on the ground, and frothing at the mouths. Those 7 riders had naturally also fallen on the ground. However, they were all cultivators, so they immediately got back to their feet, though their expressions were slightly stunned. What was going on here? How had they been thrown off their horses? Whoa! The remaining 10 riders all pulled on the reins of their horses, turning their mounts around, and looking towards Ling Han. One of them demanded, "Who are you to actually dare block our path?" Ling Han ignored him completely, and only patted the heads of the 2 children. "It's fine now. Don't cry. Go and play." Those 2 children had completely no idea how dangerous the previous scene was. They had only gotten a bad scare. Crying, they ran to the side of the path. "Brat, 7th brother is talking to you." The rider from before raised his voice. He seemed to be the leader of the band of 17. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses finally regained their wits, and all of them were furious. They had something very pressing and urgent, and could not afford to stop at all. Thus, even though they had clearly seen some children blocking their path, they had no plans to rein in their horses at all. However, they had not imagined that an elite would suddenly pop out of this tiny village, and throw their horses over. They all drew their weapons, glaring at Ling Han with eyes filled with killing intent. Ling Han crossed his arms behind him. These 17 people hadn't even entered the severing mundane tier, so it was naturally impossible that he would take them seriously. "7th brother, let's just kill him," a rider exclaimed. That 7th brother hesitated for a moment, but said, "We should prioritize our main task. Let's just give up those 7 cloud galloping horses. We'll just squeeze together, and set off immediately." "Brat, consider yourself lucky. If this had been any other time, you would have long since been chopped into several hundred pieces," these riders declared. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses rode together with the others, getting ready to leave. "Wait." Ling Han stretched out his arms. "You plan to leave just like this? Those 2 kids have probably gotten psychological trauma from your scare, so don't you think you should leave some compensation? Fuck, who do you think you are? You think you are all that impressive just because we give you some leeway?" One of the riders abused him roundly. "7th brother, this brat is practically courting death. Let us just kill him." Some of the riders got restless, their vicious nature flaring. "All right." 7th brother thought for a moment before nodding. Since Ling Han was so determined to seek death, they could only oblige him. 5 riders immediately jumped off their horses, and then spread out, surrounding Ling Han. Though their words were very overbearing, they did not dare to underestimate Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just used his body to forcibly stop the cloud-galloping horse. This kind of strength was still quite powerful. Charge! They all brandished their respective weapons, charging to attack Ling Han. Chong, 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 chong. Ling Han did not dodge or evade, and these weapons naturally all slashed onto him. However, to say nothing of his physique, even the clothing he was wearing was woven from the fur of dividing soul-tier immortal beasts. How could it be penetrated by the power of a few Genesis tiers? Not only did they not manage to pierce through, they were also bounced backwards. Pu. Immediately, 5 of their heads had been smashed by their own weapons. There were 2 that were more fortunate. One of their weapons had slashed into his left shoulder, and his whole person was practically about to be sliced apart, blood gushing forth madly. The other had been split apart from his lower abdomen, and had become 2 halves. At least they weren't dead. What? The remaining 12 were all green with shock. How could they have possibly imagined that there would actually be such a terrifying elite in such a tiny village of mortals? Though they themselves were shockingly weak as well. In the celestial realm, anyone that had not advanced into severing mundane tier definitely could not be considered any elite. Ling Han spread out his hands. "This has nothing to do with me." "Indeed. He had not made any movement at all. It was only because these 5 people were too weak. The 12 men all looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at a demonic monster. They could feel their cheeks trembling, and those that were less brave were almost about to lose control over their bladders. Come, tell me what urgent matter you have that you cannot even concern yourself with 2 kids in your path? Ling Han's expression darkened. He was very furious. He knew that he could not take control of all injustices in this world, but since he had seen it, he would stretch out his hand and interfere. Those 12 men all exchanged looks, none daring to speak. Ling Han casually flicked a finger, and a streak of sword chi swept past. One of the riders was slashed in 2. His lower half was still seated on his horse, but his upper body had slowly slipped down, and landed with a crash on the ground. Still not speaking. I'll speak. I'll speak. A rider immediately screamed out shrilly, tears and snot pouring down his face. We are the servants of the Lu clan of Great Cloud City. Recently, we have sustained the joint attacks of the Kong clan, and are already in mortal peril. Hence, under the command of the clan leader, we are heading to Green Willow City to use the summoning formation there to contact a powerful force to ask them to send some people to solve our predicament. One person took the lead to break the silence, and the others naturally began trying to outdo one another and blurted out their replies, fearing that they would be killed by Ling Han if they did not speak. Oh, what level of forces are the Lu clan and Kong clan? And what is that great force? Ling Han asked carelessly. He had already lost interest, and planned to cripple the cultivation levels of these people to prevent them from causing further harm to others in the future. Our Lu clan and the Kong clan are both severing mundane tier clans, and because Kong clan has a grand elder that has broken through to the 4th severance, they have suddenly gotten the upper hand, causing our Lu clan to suffer repeated defeats. If we're talking about that great force, hee, you would definitely be terrified to death. Imperial Void Sect. Ling Han faltered for a moment. Imperial Void. Is the sect master of the Imperial Void Sect the Imperial Void Celestial King? It is that lord precisely. Those 12 riders' expressions were all filled with manic excitement. In the celestial realm, celestial kings represented invincibility and absolute superiority. Ling Han was surprised. This was really a coincidence. To actually hear news of the Imperial Void Celestial King in this place. The ancestor of the Cheng clan, an 8th heaven celestial king, had been besieged by several celestial kings and left injured. Meanwhile, the Cheng clan was massacred by the Imperial Void Celestial King. If it had not been for the formation laid down by the celestial king of the Cheng clan, which had sent the ancestral grounds of the Cheng clan into the ancient realm, there wouldn't have been even a roof tile left behind. The large black dog had also said before that there was an unusual genius who had crippled his own cultivation level after he accomplished the 5th severance in the Severing Mundane tier. Then he had recultivated Severing Mundane tier from the beginning, and when he could achieve no further severance, he finally advanced to the Dividing Soul tier. This unusual genius was the Imperial Void Celestial King. Most importantly, the Imperial Void Celestial King had some link with the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Heavenly Venerate. A small Severing Mundane tier clan was actually linked with the Imperial Void Celestial King. Ling Han became very curious, and said, "Come, let's go to the Lu clan." Chapter 21-22. Do not trouble yourself on entertaining me. Go to the Lu clan. Why are you going to the Lu clan? Haven't you vented enough of your anger? Are you planning to commit mass killing at the Lu clan? Ling Han glared. If I tell you to lead the way, lead the way. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Never mind. He directly stretched out his hand, and lifted that 7th brother who was the leader. Then, he flicked out several streaks of energy, crippling the cultivation level of all the others. This was the punishment that he had sentenced them to for disregarding human life. Xiao, using regulations of space, his figure flashed and then reappeared, and he had already left millions and millions of miles behind him. He had obtained the spiritual void glass, and this source power of heaven and earth could allow him to possess innumerable doppelgangers in the vicinity of his body, as if countless mirrors had been placed. There would be thousands of images, and he could switch with any doppelganger he liked. In battle, this was incredibly practical. With millions of doppelgangers, Who would be able to catch any trace of his real self and deliver a fatal strike? On the other hand, he could attack through whichever doppelganger he liked, and there was practically no gap in his attacks. And added with a slight change, this could also be used in his movement technique. True body, manifested body, true body, manifested body. Continuously switching from one to the other, he could practically advance a great distance without wasting any time every time a switch was made, being even faster than lightning. If I added the regulations of lightning into the equation, could I become even faster? As Ling Han journeyed, he stroked his chin in thought. A normal person would have to travel for 3 years to complete the journey from this place to Great Cloud City, but to Ling Han, it was only a matter of 2 to 3 steps. He had not even finished a thought, and a majestic great city emerged before him. He stopped, and released his grip. Wah! Seventh brother immediately threw up, feeling like all his organs had been flipped and overturned to the point that they were about to rip out of his stomach. He was only in the Genesis tier, so how could his body sustain this kind of spatial movement? Yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest sympathy. A person like him who disregarded human life deserved it. He walked forwards, a thread of energy turning into a rope that bound seventh brother, dragging him with him. Halt! When they arrived outside the city gates, Ling Han was stopped by the guards. Entrance fee. As seventh brother. One of the guards saw seventh brother who was being towed around by Ling Han, and immediately got a shock. What, seventh brother? Another guard looked towards seventh brother, his eyes flickering slightly. The Lu clan was a noble clan of Great Cloud City, and so was the Kong clan. These two clans had joint control of Great Cloud City, and that applied to the entrance fee for entering the city. The clans were in charge of 2 city gates, respectively, and this place was the city gate that was under the control of the Lu clan. However, a great conflict had recently erupted between the Lu clan and Kong clan, and the Kong clan was clearly enjoying the upper hand. It seemed like not only was the Lu clan going to be defeated, it was even possible that they would completely withdraw from Great Cloud City. Thus, these guards that were under the jurisdiction of the Lu clan naturally had other thoughts. Should they change sides to the Kong clan soon? Then, they only had to apprehend seventh brother, and if they delivered him to the Kong clan, then even if they could not get a great reward, it would be enough as a show of their stand. At the very least, seventh brother was also a centurion of the Lu clan's troops. However, they immediately discovered something off. That was because they saw that seventh brother seemed to be tied by an invisible rope. When Ling Han moved, he would move as well, like he was a dead pig being dragged around. Hiss, they could not trifle with him. They all shook their heads. To say nothing of snatching the hostage from Ling Han's hands, they did not even collect city entrance fees from him, respectfully escorting Ling Han into the city. After being guards for so many years, they had also acquired a considerable insight. There were some people that could not be trifled with. Ling Han naturally did not object, and asked seventh brother, "Which direction?" "There." Seventh brother had completely lost all temper, and pointed in a direction. Ling Han used the regulations of space and rapidly advanced. After about 15 minutes, he stopped. A town had appeared ahead in a small world. This could completely be considered a massive city, but in the celestial realm, this was only a small town. They had arrived at the Lu clan. However, there was a huge army surrounding the small town, and catapults were presently shooting out massive rocks that flew and blasted in the direction of the small town. Tong! The massive rocks had not even landed when a shield of light appeared above the small town and blocked them, and after every crash, the shield of light would tremble as multiple seals flickered. Clearly, the Lu clan was protected by a defense formation, and the Kong clan was using the most primitive method to unravel their defenses, exhausting all the energy of the formation. Ling Han only swept a passing glance and immediately understood. This formation was powered by human power, and at this moment, there were several hundred people that were inserting their origin power into this formation. A great many people had already paled, and they could not last much longer. Sight indeed could not take a turn, but divine sense was like mercury being poured onto the ground, and could be everywhere. Seventh brother was dumbfounded in shock. He had just left Lu clan 3 days ago, but in the blink of an eye, he had returned once more. Just how powerful was this man? "Who are you?" In the outer circle of the town, a member of the Kong clan discovered Ling Han, and immediately flew over in a leap, calling out towards him in loud rebuke. "Someone here to watch the show. No need to trouble yourself to entertain me," Ling Han said with a smile, not even stopping in his advance. "Entertain your head." Someone was more quick-tempered, and immediately pounced over, waving his saber at Ling Han. Sigh. Seventh brother released a soundless sigh, as if he could already see how this person would end. As expected, when the saber slashed onto Ling Han's body with a bang, not only had it not managed to pierce through Ling Han's defense, the force ricocheted back towards the attacker at an extraordinarily fast speed. With a PU, the latter's head was directly smashed into bits. Ling Han did not feel any sympathy. If this person had been more merciful, and had not used his full force, he should have been able to easily disperse this blow that had bounced back towards him. It was his own decision to leave no way out for others, which also announced his own death sentence. "How dare you! An elite!" The members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock, and after a momentary commotion, a person strode out. His face was square, and looked very dignified. This was a severing mundane tier, and he was only a third severance. However, everyone had a different destiny depending on their different origins. Some severing mundane tiers could only lower themselves to becoming thieves and gangsters, while there would be some that would be posing around, putting on airs greater than even ascending origin tier elites. "Sir, the destruction of the Liu clan is already a foregone conclusion, so why do you have to touch this pool of troubled water?" he asked calmly, his tone even. Only a Genesis tier had died, which naturally could not cause any stir of emotion in him. The other party had to be a severing mundane tier elite. If he was a fourth severance, and the Liu clan had two such elites, the matter would not be settled easily. Ling Han broke into a smile. "I already said that you do not have to trouble yourself to entertain me. That's it." He waved a hand dismissively, and continued onwards. "Hee. Then let me first take a measure of you, sir." That third severance Grand Elder moved, and grabbed at Ling Han's shoulder. If he could easily succeed, then he would kill Ling Han with the next blow. To dare to interfere in the matters of the Kong clan, the newcomer had to be tired of living. And if the other's strength was very powerful, no weaker than the elders, the latter would then advise the former to leave. After all, it was a very troublesome matter to be targeted by a severing mundane Grand Elder. Unless he had the certainty that he could kill him definitely, he could not be easily offended. The Kong clan was a big household, with innumerable clan members, and how many of them had attained severing mundane tier? Ling Han seemed to have completely failed to sense the approach of this blow. He did not stop moving, or even turn his head at all. "You are seeking death." That third severance Grand Elder's killing intent instantly blazed. His hand was already less than an inch away from Ling Han's back. He had absolute certainty that he could kill Ling Han. "Just die then." Without the slightest hesitation, he clawed out at Ling Han's back. "Ah!" A pained cry rang out. Chapter 21-23. Why have you come? Anyone would think that the person that had released this pained shout should be Ling Han, but the result had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. That third severance Grand Elder of the Kong clan was clasping his right wrist, his expression filled with agony. His blow had landed on Ling Han's back, yet it was as if he had struck divine metal. Furthermore, because he had intended to kill, he was both harsh and heavy in his assault, which had directly broken his 5 fingers by the force of the rebound. The nerves of the fingertips were linked with the heart, so it was naturally extremely painful. "Ah!" That third severance Grand Elder was screaming incredibly miserably, tears practically streaming down his cheeks. Ling Han turned his head slightly and asked, "Are you all right?" "All right." "Fuck all right, of course I am not all right." However, what that third severance Grand Elder felt even more was terror. The other man had not dodged or evaded, allowing the elder's attack to land solidly, but the result was that it was instead the elder whose finger bones had been broken. Just what kind of astonishing strength was this? "My lord." He forcibly suppressed the pain, and greeted Ling Han respectfully. "This junior is fine." "Then what were you screaming for?" Ling Han pretended to be surprised. "This junior has lost his mind," that third severance Grand Elder hurriedly declared. Ling Han gave an "Oh. Then you should get some treatment." He extended a hand and pressed down. That third Severance Grand Elder was instantly rendered into 7 or 8 pieces, but Ling Han had not dealt a fatal blow. Thus, if that third Severance Grand Elder was pieced together, he could still rebuild himself and continue living. But everyone, whether those outside or inside the town, was dumbfounded and gaping with shock. That was too strong, wasn't it? Fourth Severance Grand Elder. At least that, and he might even be a king tier among Fourth Severance powerhouses at that. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so powerful? In this instant, no one knew what kind of relation Ling Han had with the Liu clan, whether they were enemies or friends. Thus, the Liu clan side did not feel unburdened, while the Kong clan side did not dare continue their assault, either. All of a sudden, a silence had fallen. One person alone could decide the battle. This was the effect of an elite. Ling Han was unconcerned. He continued to drag seventh brother as he walked forwards, and very quickly, he had arrived in front of the small town. The defense formation was just a short distance ahead. On the city walls, an elder asked Ling Han, "Sir, are you friend or foe?" This was a fourth Severance Grand Elder, as well as the present clan leader of the Liu clan, Liu Huashan. Ling Han broke into a smile. "Now that you have a visitor, are you not going to invite me in?" On the city walls, the members of the Liu clan all began to shake their heads. He got to be kidding. Presently, they were still protected by the formation, but once they deactivated it, they would be like an exquisite beauty lying naked in front of a pervert. It would be too dangerous. Before finding out whether Ling Han was friend or foe, they would have to be extremely careful, and definitely could not afford to be careless. Ling Han sighed. "The way you treat guests is really too horrible. I want to file a complaint." "Sir, if you can help our Liu clan resolve the present predicament, you can ask for whatever you want," Liu Huashan declared, appearing to be very generous. There was no way he could not be generous. That was because under the powerful assault of the Kong clan, they could not last for long, and once the city was breached, all members of the Liu clan, young and old, would be killed. If they were dead, what would be the point of having wealth? If Sir could penetrate the city defenses of the Liu clan, then all the wealth of the Liu clan can be handed over to Sir. On the Kong clan side, an elder also stepped out. Though he was extremely far away, his voice was still clearly transmitted. This was the clan leader of the Kong clan, Kong Zhongjin. "Lord Clan Leader!" The members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock. What, to actually hand over all the wealth of the Liu clan? Then wouldn't the Kong clan have gone to so much trouble for nothing? Yet Kong Zhongjin waved a dismissive hand. These juniors really were short-sighted. The true wealth of the Liu clan lay in their mines and herb gardens. Ling Han could not move these, and even if Kong Zhongjin had presently gotten the upper hand, they would still have to pay a very great price if they wanted to eliminate the Liu clan. Though his words were very generous, he was merely being generous with the wealth of others. "Sir!" Liu Huashan called out loudly. "Sir!" Kong Zhongjin also shouted loudly. Now, Ling Han was a variable. His strength was unfathomable, so everyone wanted to snatch him to their side. Who knew, the scales of victory could tilt in favor of one side just because he leaned towards them. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If you are not willing to invite me in, I can only enter by myself." He raised a hand and pressed down. Wang, a wall of light immediately appeared out of thin air, seals of great Tao flickering. Ling Han stretched out a finger and flicked. Wang, the wall of light trembled slightly like a ripple rising on the surface of water, crystalline waves rising up. "What is he doing?" someone asked curiously. "He can't be planning to break through the formation by force, right? That is practically a delusion. This is the Dhara subduing formation, capable of stopping even Heaven's soul elites. If that hadn't been the case, we would have long since broken through. We can only use our own formation to break through this formation, and use war machines to slowly wear away at the power of the members of Liu clan, so that the great formation would lose its source of power. Though he is very strong, if he can really break through the formation, I will swallow this rock." The members of the Kong clan whispered among themselves, and so did the members of the Liu clan. However, they were even more confident, and thought that as long as there was someone maintaining the formation, then this great formation could never be penetrated. Sir, you don't have to waste your time. There is no possible way you can penetrate the formation, Lu Huashan stated calmly. Ling Han smiled faintly and channeled the regulation of slaughter. He delivered a stroke of his finger. Pa! The shield of light trembled slightly and immediately shattered like crystal, turning into countless pieces of crystal that reflected dazzling light. Pooh! Everyone spluttered simultaneously. The formation had really been broken through, and it had only been by a finger at that. What kind of force was this? It was too terrifying and astonishing. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of the opening and enter. Thus, the shield of light was reformed very soon, and enshrouded the town once more. After all, Ling Han had not destroyed the formation, and merely broken through the formation's shield by force. It was like how a person penetrated the defenses of his opponent in a battle between cultivators. But the question of whether he would inflict injury on his opponent would depend on whether he continued to follow up on his assault. Ling Han channeled the regulations of lightning again, and a purple seal immediately appeared in the palm of his hand, flickering with electricity. He stretched out his hand and pressed down lightly on the shield of light. Z! The lightning immediately shot out from the palm of his hand, instantly covering the entire shield of light. Pa! The shield of light crumbled immediately, falling in pieces accompanied by the light of electricity. The formation had again been broken. Pooh! Everyone was once again gaping with open mouths and bulging eyes. He had broken through the formation again, and it was using another method at that. Ling Han still did not take a step. Hence, the shield of light recovered once more. In high spirits, he tried the regulations of space again. With a flash of his figure, he had directly appeared on the other side of the shield of light. Everyone responded, air. Then, he used the 9 heavens flame, Shenin source water, firm essence green gold, and so on. In short, he had used every single one of the 8 source powers of heaven and earth once, and he could easily break through that defense formation each and every time. Everyone was already shocked to numbness. Their mouths twitched madly, yet they could not spit out a single word. This is not very fun. Ling Han shook his head, and finally strode into the small town. Retreat, retreat, Kong Zhongjin said in a quivering voice. This man was terrifyingly powerful, and Kong Zhongjin had actually intended on bargaining with him. He had really been outrageously bold. The members of the Kong clan were already trembling in fear, scared witless. Now that they had gotten the command from their Grand Elder, they instantly turned around and fled in panic, fearing that Ling Han would suddenly change his mind, and say he wanted to pay a visit to the Kong clan or something. My lord! The members of the Lu clan could not flee. They could only get off from the city walls, and knelt down to make their salutations to Ling Han. Lu Huashan was the clan leader, after all. Gathering his courage, he asked, "Dare I ask, my lord, why you have come?" Chapter 21-24. Untitled. Ling Han pulled 7th brother forwards and replied, "I am here to seek justice." "Seek justice? My lord, dare I ask what offense our clan has committed against you?" Lu Huashan asked cautiously. Ling Han kicked 7th brother and replied, "Not me but 2 kids." He related how 7th brother and his party had almost run over the children. Hearing Ling Han finish his tale, every member of the Lu clan bore strange expressions. Fuck, just because of such a minor matter, you actually charged personally to the Lu clan. Wasn't it just 2 mere mortals? Who would care about their life or death? Ling Han swept a glance over the masses and stated calmly, "I care." Though the members of the Lu clan still thought nothing of it, they did not dare reveal their thoughts in their expressions. "Then dare I ask, my lord, what kind of compensation you wish to seek from us?" Lu Huashan asked. Whatever the case, Ling Han had still resolved the threat of the Kong clan for them, at least for now. That was the case, and Ling Han also had the ability to destroy the Lu clan single-handedly. Thus, the members of the Lu clan naturally dared not show any disrespect towards him at all. This was a demon king. Who knew what kind of terrifying damage would be caused by his thunderous rage? Since you cannot control your own subordinates, then does the Lu clan still have the need to exist? Ling Han asked calmly. You want to destroy our Lu clan? Lu Huashan inhaled sharply. Ling Han shook his head. I will give you a month's time to disband the Lu clan. Otherwise, I will disband it on your behalf. Milord, those were just two little brats, and our Lu clan would have Ito pay such an exorbitant price for it. This is unjust. Lu Huashan called out loudly, filled with defiance. 1 month. Ling Han did not waste any more words, and merely found a house in the town to stay in. He had deliberately given a time limit of a month. Hi's purpose was not to destroy the Lu clan, but rather to force the Lu clan to continue seeking out the members of the Imperial Void sect. This was an opportunity. He wanted to find his way into the Imperial Void sect. The Imperial Void Celestial King was linked in countless ways with the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable, and it is extremely possible that he was the disciple of the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. To Ling Han, making his way into the Imperial Void sect is not his ultimate motive. What he really wanted to find out about was the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. When the Master of the Black Tower died, did it have any relation with the 3 great Heavenly Venerates? Ling Han's guess was yes. Otherwise, why would Small Tower be so incredibly wary about these 3 great Heavenly Venerates? Then what was the real truth? Why had the ancient realm been split in 2? A Heavenly Venerate couldn't have possibly done something like that for no fathomable reason, right? The large black dog had once said that the 3 great Heavenly Venerates treated the storm of darkness passively. What kind of attitude did these 3 mighty figures actually maintain? There were a great many matters that he would only find out once he made actual contact. He would use the Lu clan as contact point, and enter into the Imperial Void sect first, and then further enter into the Sealed Emotion Palace. Lord Clan Leader, what should we do? The moment Ling Han left, the members of the Lu clan exploded. That guy must be a dividing soul tier, and have astonishing battle prowess to be able to forcibly break through the formation. Even if our strength was multiplied 100-fold over, it would still be useless. Lu Huashan pressed his hands down and said in displeasure, "What are you panicking about? Don't we still have one last move to make?" Xiaofan, go and pay a personal visit to send the news to the Green Willow City. He looked towards an elder. This was a 3rd Severance Grand Elder of Lu clan, and the 2nd strongest elite aside from him. Lu Xiaoshan hummed and said, "But if I leave, what if the Kong clan comes to attack us again?" WTH, a 3rd Severance Grand Elder drawn away. If the Kong clan came to attack again, the Lu clan would be in danger. It's fine. As long as that bringer of calamity is still here, the Kong clan would definitely not dare to be rash. Lu Huashan appeared to be brimming with confidence. "Clan leader, is that really trustworthy?" someone asked. Lu Huashan nodded. "With the ancestral records as proof, we are indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King. However, it is rather hard to speak about. Our ancestor was birthed from an accident between the 7th-generation grandson of Imperial Void Celestial King with a courtesan." Everyone gave an "oh." No wonder Lu Huashan had previously been so unwilling to speak of the relationship between them and the Imperial Void Celestial King, so that was the case. Indeed, this was really very embarrassing. "All right, I will immediately set out." Lu Xiaoshan nodded. He made a prompt decision, and hurried towards Green Willow City. With his cultivation level, if he exerted all his effort, he would be able to arrive in 11 or 12 days. This was also why Ling Han had given the time limit of a month. After Lu Xiaoshan arrived, he immediately used the summoning formation there to obtain contact with the Imperial Void sect. Originally, with his status, there was no possible way that he would be able to gain contact. However, he clarified his identity at the first moment, and the other would rather believe it to be truth than not, and thus helped him to find a powerful figure of the sect. The message was passed through multiple levels, and verified repeatedly. In a mere 3 days, the identity of the Lu clan was confirmed. They were indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, but their bloodline was already extremely and boundlessly distant. However, the descendants of a Celestial King were still the descendants of a Celestial King. How could they be allowed to be slighted? There is actually such an arrogant person. I really would like to see him for myself. When they were in the midst of discussion whom they should send, a man dressed in green robes spoke. He looked extremely young, yet had an overbearing air, as if even celestial kings would have to grovel in front of him. Yulan Fenghua, the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King, and also his most beloved divided soul. At present, his cultivation level was Earth Soul, and was a monarch among monarchs. It is said that he has inherited some portion of the graceful bearing of the Imperial Void Celestial King when he was young. Holy Son Yulan, there is absolutely no need for you to go, is there? Someone hurriedly advised. Though Yulan Fenghua's cultivation level was not very high, because he was too favored by the Imperial Void Celestial King, even a first heaven or second heaven Celestial King would have to give him some face. He was too important. If anything happened to him, the Imperial Void Celestial King would definitely fly into a thunderous rage, and no one would be able to bear that kind of consequences. It's fine. He can only be a heaven soul at most, Yulan Fenghua stated carelessly. Though he was only an earth soul, he had defeated even heaven soul monarch tiers before. It could be said that any dividing soul tier would only be an ant in his eyes. Because he was not only the Imperial Void Celestial King's disciple, he had also obtained personal guidance from the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. That was a Heavenly Venerable tier. What kind of character was that? Reigning supreme over the heaven and earth, he naturally could make him so strong that even monarch tiers could only feel despair. He did not believe that Ling Han was capable of matching him. It was just a spontaneous impulse that gave him the idea of making this trip. The moment that Yulan Fenghua had decided, aside from the Imperial Void Celestial King, no other person could make him change his mind. All right, then Holy Son Yulan will set out. Yulan Fenghua set out. He had a flight device, which the Imperial Void Celestial King had personally strengthened with regulations of the Great Tao. Its speed of flight was astonishingly fast, and in a mere 3 days, he had arrived at the Green Willow City from a boundlessly far location. He contacted Lu Huashan, and they returned together to the Lu clan. When he got the news, Lu Huashan immediately appeared together with the important figures of the clan, to receive the arrival of Yulan Fenghua. Welcome, Lord Holy Son. The members of the Lord all paid their greetings respectfully. Though they were the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, their bloodline was too distant. Furthermore, they were birthed by a courtesan, so they naturally had even less confidence. Yulan Fenghua was completely unconcerned. He had seen this kind of scene too many times, and it was absolutely impossible to make him feel any kind of feeling of superiority anymore. He nodded casually and said, "Where is that arrogant man? Let me lead the way," Lu Huashan hurriedly proclaimed. Led by Lu Huashan, the members of the Lu clan all followed, and charged grandly to where Ling Han was presently staying. He actually dared to threaten the Lu clan? Fuck, let's see if we won't kill you, be it starred. Chapter 21-25. Overlord of Monarch Tiers. Though the town was big, everyone was still severing mundane tier elites. Thus, in less than 7 or 8 minutes, everyone had arrived at the first level of the house Ling Han was staying in. This was a 3-story tall building, and Ling Han was staying on the 3rd floor. "You insolent madman, scram out immediately!" The members of the Lu clan immediately shouted. By now, they were filled with confidence. The limit of a month has not arrived yet, and you people have already settled your matters? Ling Han's voice rang out from upstairs. "You're dreaming. Today is the day that you deliver up your head. Hurry and get down to pay your greetings to Lord Holy Son." The members of the Lu clan all demanded at once. "Holy Son." Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had actually drawn out a Holy Son of the Imperial Void Sect? It looked like the Lu clan was still quite important. He opened the window, and swept a glance over the gathered masses. Immediately, he focused on Yulan Fenghua. Such a man that seemed to possess his own halo would be like a crane in a flock of chickens wherever he was, incredibly striking to the eye. Yulan Fenghua also looked towards Ling Han, his gaze slightly flickering, and revealing a hint of surprise. He could actually feel a coldness from Ling Han, causing him to feel a slight stab of pain, as if he had encountered a strong enemy. Was this possible? Who was he? Monarch of monarchs, the disciple of Imperial Void Celestial King, the grand disciple of the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. With such a prestigious identity, who else could compare to him in this world? Could it be that the other was a top-grade Heaven Soul Monarch tier? That had to be the case. Come down, kneel and cripple your limbs, and I will spare your life, he stated calmly. Even if he felt pressure, he was still filled with confidence in himself, and thought that if they were really going to battle, he would definitely still be the ultimate victor. To defeat an opponent stronger than him was something he was an expert in. It was also a tag that was attached to him, a dazzling halo of light. Ling Han chuckled and then spat out, "Idiot! Idiot!" Yulan Fenghua was slightly startled, and then a shock filled with absolute disbelief rose up in him. Was this really a monarch tier? To actually speak in such an unreserved manner, this was practically disgraceful. Involuntarily, he clenched his fists. The self-control that he had always taken pride in seemed to easily collapse in front of Ling Han. He took a few deep breaths, and only then did he suppress his fury. The pride of our Imperial Void sect cannot be trampled on by anyone. Since you refuse to take the way out that I have already offered to you, I can only send you on your way to the underworld. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han bit into a crisp apple, appearing incredibly casual. What I enjoy the most is stepping on those so-called prodigies. You seem to have an itch, so are you asking to be beaten? You're seeking death. Yulan Fenghua exclaimed lightly. His figure rose into the air, and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han's right hand clenched into a fist, and delivered a punch at Yulan Fenghua. Pang, the two men each launched a blow. Instantly, origin power clashed first, forming a contention of power. Boundless regulations surged, turning into indestructible blades. Pang, pang, pang. All objects in their surroundings were instantly rendered into scraps. Because Ling Han had moved in, the surrounding residents had long since moved out, but there were still a great many people that had come with Yulan Fenghua. Swept by these sharp blades, many were immediately killed. Lu Huashan couldn't help but shiver, his face twitching madly. They were done for, done for. Those that were qualified to come were the pillars of support of the clan, and now practically more than half of them had been eliminated with a single clash. To the Lu clan, this was a severe hit, and they might not be able to recover from this kind of damage even in several 100 million years. Why was this still the result when Yulan Fenghua had come? This time, Yulan Fenghua was really surprised. Ling Han was actually Yin Soul tier, a minor level lower than himself even. Impossible! His opponent's cultivation level was lower than his own, yet the other party could actually exude such intimidating pressure, and made him feel as if he was facing a powerful foe. In fact, he even managed to sustain a blow from him. How could there be such a freak? I am Yulan Fenghua, he announced in a deep voice. He did not even spare a glance at the members of Lu clan, who had been implicated in the shockwave, and were looking at him. The Imperial Void Celestial King really had too many descendants, and facing such existences whose bloodline was so distant that it was practically negligible, and who had such lowly origins, there was naturally no need to be overly concerned about their life or death. Ling Han calmly stated, a hint of seriousness flashing through his gaze. The pressure that Yulan Fenghua gave him was not inferior to what he felt from Ji Wuming. However, Yulan Fenghua was an Earth Soul, a minor level higher than Ling Han. With such a comparison, it could be seen that Yulan Fenghua was inferior to Ji Wuming. True, Ji Wuming was a 9th Heaven Celestial King that had reincarnated and was recultivating. Aside from a person like Ling Han who was blessed by heaven, how could others compare? Ling Han? Ling Han? Yulan Fenghua murmured a few times. I will remember that. No need, no need. Ling Han hurriedly waved a hand. I do not have the habit of being remembered by men. Cheeky mouth. Yulan Fenghua's expression darkened. He raised his right hand and gripped the empty air, as if there was something solid in his hand. Then, he began to drag from his left hand to his right hand, and a transparent sword appeared out of thin air. If you can block 100 moves from me, I'll spare your life, he declared. Though Ling Han had managed to block a blow from Yulan Fenghua, the latter was still filled with an absolute confidence in victory and himself. However, He still did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest, and summoned his own pseudo-celestial tool. Otherwise, he did not have the confidence that he could kill Ling Han in 100 moves. Then I'll play with you. Ling Han felt a thrill. He, too, wanted to know what extent his present battle prowess had reached. Kill! Yulan Fenghua's figure pounced, and in a flash, it was 3 divided souls charging out together. They charged to assault Ling Han from 3 sides, while the original was brandishing the pseudo-celestial tool in a slash towards Ling Han. There were just 4 of them, yet possessed an imposing aura as if not even a magnificent army could compare. Any one of them could easily pierce a hole in the dome of heaven, and dictate the heaven and earth. Ling Han did not use his divided souls, but rather drew the divine demon sword, and charged towards Yulan Fenghua. Arrogance! Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. The other man wanted to oppose him without using his divided souls. The 4 of him were one and the same, and launched a mad offensive towards Ling Han simultaneously. Pang! 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 The careless shock waves produced from their clashes could cause massive damage. Before even 10 moves had lapsed, the small town of the Liu clan had already been completely destroyed. Not only had the foundations completely vanished, even a deep layer of the land had been scraped away, turning into a large lake. Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were battling intensely above this lake. Ling Han channeled various source powers, but not only was he unable to suppress Yulan Fenghua, he was beaten into continuous retreat, and had fallen into a disadvantage. Strong, he was really strong. He had no choice but to summon his 2 divided souls to join the battle, or he would really be no match for Yulan Fenghua. The 2 great young prodigies were all exerting their full efforts. Every blow was capable of rendering the sun dim and lightless, causing even the stars to lose their color. Yulan Fenghua's expression was slightly ugly. He actually only managed to battle Ling Han to a tie. To say nothing of the fact he still had a superior advantage of a minor level, even if both their cultivation levels were equal, this was still something he could not accept. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he should be absolutely invincible. It's about close to 300 moves, right? Ling Han asked casually. Previously, Yulan Fenghua had made a promise of defeating Ling Han within 100 moves. Yulan Fenghua did not utter a word. He was now truly angered. Even if he could not kill Ling Han, he still wanted to defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, his pride would not allow it. Heavenly Pillar! He shouted lightly, and made a pulling movement. Suddenly, a transparent, crystal-like pillar descended from the heavens, pressing down on Ling Han. Ha! Ling Han shockingly discovered that his body could no longer move. Chapter 21-26. Arrangements. This was a spatial restraint. Before the Celestial King tier, the regulations of space were superior to the 5 elements, and most people cultivated the 5 elements. Thus, anyone who cultivated the regulations of space would be superior to others by nature. Yulan Fenghua showed a hint of arrogance. This was the secret technique unique to the Imperial Void Celestial King. Among the Imperial Void Celestial King's 9 disciples, he was the only one who had grasped this secret technique. Beneath the heavenly pillar, Ling Han's limbs would be restrained, as if he was suppressed by the pillar of heaven. Boom! He sent out a palm strike directly at Ling Han's chest. If this blow landed, Ling Han would definitely sustain serious injury. However, Yulan Fenghua had deliberately avoided his mind, which could be considered as having fulfilled his previous promise. As long as Ling Han could survive 100 moves from him, he would spare Ling Han's life. Ling Han smiled faintly. Wang, the space around him warped, as if countless mirrors had come to being. Ling Han's image could be seen everywhere. You can use regulations of space, and you think I can't? Yulan Fenghua immediately came to an abrupt stop. That was because he could not distinguish which was the real Ling Han at all. All of them exuded an aura that made it seem like they were the real one, but how could so many true selves exist, so they had to be false? Then where was the real one? Great spatial cut. He was only taken aback for a moment, and then immediately used another celestial technique. The pseudo-celestial tool in his hold glowed, and sent out a streak of light that was 30,000 meters long, slashing out at his surroundings. Instantly, the space was shattered. Those images of Ling Han also shattered into pieces. Finally, Ling Han's true self appeared. He was standing in the air 300 meters away, and his two divided souls stood beside him. Yulan Fenghua stood, sword in hand. You are indeed very strong, but definitely no match for me. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han asked smilingly. He had not used Great Clash of Source Powers. He was sure that if he used this move, even if Yulan Fenghua did not die, he would definitely not dare to take a second attack from him. That is because I really am that strong, Yulan Fenghua declared proudly, pressing out his left hand at Ling Han. Chong, multiple divine chains of regulations shot out, turning into a web that sealed off all paths of retreat for Ling Han. Ling Han also pressed out his left hand, the regulation of slaughter activating. Sword Qi danced wildly, slashing the divine chains of regulations that Yulan Fenghua had shot out into bits. He launched an offensive, and the heaven-destroying 9 swords was used, its vicious might soaring sky-high. Pang, 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 wang, wang, wang. The two great prodigies clashed, and one celestial technique after another was cast. The explosive tension became heavier and heavier, and the might of their secret techniques also became stronger and stronger. All prodigies were proud, especially for overlords of monarch tiers like them. If their cultivation levels were close, then they would definitely want to win, and Yulan Fenghua's pressure was clearly heavier because he had the advantage of a minor level over Ling Han. Even if Ling Han forced him to a tie, he could not accept it, either. Otherwise, how could he bring himself to face others in future? Unleashing a battle cry, his whole person became ethereal. One after another, spatial spikes shot out from his body. Each one was the overwhelming blow of the pinnacle of Heaven Soul, and it was guaranteed that even a Heaven Soul monarch tier would be incredibly troubled by this. Ling Han had no wish to easily expose the secret of the toughness of his physique. Thus, he also used regulations of space, and manifested thousands of himself. No matter how strong your attack was, so what? If it could not hit me, it was completely useless. The two prodigies were continuously and endlessly battling intensely like that. Sometimes, it would be Ling Han beating down on Yulan Fenghua, while at other times, it was Yulan Fenghua instead that was suppressing Ling Han. Offensive and defensive switched from one side to the other at a shocking speed, and neither of them could truly claim the upper hand. Ha 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 ha. Yulan Fenghua suddenly laughed loudly. He took the initiative to stop and said, "Your strength is close to mine, and it would be meaningless for us to continue fighting. Why don't we call a ceasefire now?" "Sure." Ling Han nodded. All that he had done was merely to make his way into the Imperial Void Sect, so he naturally wouldn't really battle Yulan Fenghua to the death. If he was really serious, he would have used the Great Clash of Source Powers. The destructive power of that was enough to destroy the heavens and earth, and was even capable of blasting a hole through the void. Come, Brother Han, let us have a nice chat." Yulan Fenghua pulled on Ling Han's hand, presenting an image of good friends and brothers. All the members of the Liu clan exchanged looks. They were done just like that. Hadn't he said that he would kill Ling Han? And now, the Liu clan was already razed to the ground, with many of their members dead. Whom were they going to seek justice from? But Yulan Fenghua was the holy son of the Imperial Void Sect, while they were only the descendants of a courtesan. How could they compare? Furthermore, the gap in power was practically the difference between heaven and earth, so they had best just keep quiet. Who knew, they might even anger Yulan Fenghua into eliminating them. Yulan Fenghua was smiling very brightly on the surface, but killing intent was already shifting quietly in his heart. He could do nothing against Ling Han, but he was also sure that Ling Han could not do anything to him. However, Ling Han was inferior to him by a minor level. Thus, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, he was definitely no match for Ling Han. Which also meant that the latter was even more freakishly genius than himself. He definitely could not allow this kind of prodigy to exist in his eyes, and he was determined to eliminate him. Thus, he had to appease Ling Han first, and then set up some arrangements to get rid of Ling Han. Someone that was even more freakish than himself could not be allowed to exist in this world, at least not someone without any kind of background like Ling Han. He had already left the Liu clan town with Ling Han. though it had already been razed to the ground. Then they found a restaurant, sat facing each other, and began to talk. Yulan Fenghua was trying to worm info out of Ling Han, and Ling Han was attempting the same thing. Yulan Fenghua wanted to know of Ling Han's origins. If this guy was connected to a ninth heaven celestial king or even heavenly venerable tier, then even he would not dare to act recklessly. And Ling Han wanted to know more about the Imperial Void Sect, so there was naturally no simpler, more direct means than asking the Holy Son of the Imperial Void Sect. Additionally, Ling Han also wanted to know which heavenly realm he was in. If he were to ask directly, others would probably laugh themselves to death. You didn't even know where you yourself were. After talking for a long time, the two of them finally gained some information that they each needed. Yulan Fenghua had confirmed that Ling Han did not come from any kind of powerful background, but was truly very talented and had extremely good luck, while Ling Han also found out some facts about the Imperial Void Sect. At least, he found out which heavenly realm he was currently in. 10,000 Splendors Heaven, which lay adjacent to the Rock Heaven. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, he had not been diverted too far away. Brother Ling, are you interested in paying a visit to the Imperial Void Sect? Yulan Fenghua offered an invitation to Ling Han. With your natural talent, Brother Ling, my master may also appreciate you, and might even take you in as a disciple. Here it comes. Ling Han was not willing to believe that the other man would really be so kind. Instead, he only wished to deceive him into entering the Imperial Void Sect. By then, with Yulan Fenghua's status, it would be extremely easy for him to kill him secretly with a trap. However, this fell in line with Ling Han's own plans. He wanted to enter into the Imperial Void Sect, and finally enter into the sealed emotion palace with that as his stepping stone. However, it was not now. I still have some private matters to settle, so maybe a while later, Ling Han replied. He wanted to go to the Rock Palace first. That could no longer wait. When? Yulan Fenghua asked, unwilling to resign. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, We'll set the time at 100 years from now then. All right, then I will wait for Brother Ling's arrival at the Imperial Void Sect. Yulan Fenghua was not the type to worry about his gains and losses. Immediately, he clapped his hands. To Celestials, 100 years' time would pass practically with a snap of the fingers. Ling Han nodded and said, I will take my leave. Please. Yulan Fenghua stood up to send him off. Ling Han had already achieved his goal for this trip, so he naturally would not loiter around much longer. His only purpose for deliberately taking this detour was the Imperial Void Sect. You have to consider seriously, Small Tower spoke up suddenly. Chapter 21-27. Besieged. What do you mean? Ling Han asked. The Imperial Void Celestial King is no ordinary Ninth Heaven Celestial King. His strength is unfathomable, and is just a thread's breadth away from Heavenly Venerable Tier, Small Tower said solemnly. If he was given a few more epochs, he may really be able to break the great limits of heaven and earth, and successfully attain Heavenly Venerable Tier. If he gets curious about you, there is no way you would be able to keep any secrets. Ling Han nodded and replied, It's fine. It's just an idea in my head for now. It's not like I am so determined to go. However, could it be that there is no way that I could fool the eyes of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, or even a Heavenly Venerate? If the one he was talking to was not Small Tower, it would be absolutely impossible for Ling Han to voice out such a question. To fool the eyes of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, or even a Heavenly Venerate. Was he joking? However, Small Tower was a Heavenly Venerable Tier tool, so perhaps there was indeed some way possible. Small Tower paused, and after a while, it finally said, There is a secret technique in the Heavenly Saint Palace that can fool the heavens and earth, and coordinating with your power of the 5 element source powers, it should be possible for you to temporarily deceive a Ninth Heaven Celestial King. However, if the Imperial Void Celestial King observes you carefully, don't even think of hiding anything. Don't you even think about Heavenly Venerable Tier. This has surpassed the regulations of heaven and earth, and has touched directly on essence. Ling Han nodded. Apparently, he really needed to make a trip to the Heavenly Saint Palace, and he could just see his son while he was at it. Who knew if this silly brat was still being imprisoned? He set out towards the rock heaven, his speed becoming faster and faster. Too many years had passed. He longed to see his parents and lovers again. Such thoughts became increasingly urgent and pressing. Now that he had grasped the powerful regulations of space, he used the void space and pushed his speed to the pinnacle. 2 months later, he entered the rock heaven. It could not be helped. Even if his present speed had reached the pinnacle, that was still only the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Any immortal palace tier would be able to easily crush him. It was only 2 months, and this was already very fast. After entering the rock heaven, he would occasionally see manifestations of chi forming multiple images of the rock in the air. However, he quickly saw arrows shoot from the ground and destroy these manifestations. At first, Ling Han thought this was only a random phenomenon, but after several times of the same thing happening, Ling Han finally realized that something was off. Xiao, another sharp arrow shot out, and shattered the chi of the rock. Ling Han immediately flew, descending down towards where the sharp arrow had shot out from. His figure descended, and saw that a middle-aged man was just presently withdrawing the giant bow he was holding. It was dark green in color, and even taller than the archer. "Brat, what are you looking at?" This middle-aged man tossed a glare at him, multiple great stars appearing in his pupils, and exuding a frightening aura. This was an immortal palace tier great elite. Ling Han clasped his fists together in greeting, and said, "This junior just happened to pass by, and coincidentally saw senior use your powerful technique." The arrow furiously shot through the skies, possessing boundless dominance. "I have thus deliberately come over, wishing to admire senior's graceful bearing." He could speak in a very caustic manner, causing others to stomp in fury, but at the same time, he could also speak in a way that made others feel very pleased and comfortable. This middle-aged man was very pleased by this compliment, and couldn't help but laugh loudly as he said, "That's right. I am renowned as the ultimate shot. 1 man and 1 arrow, and I can stop thousands of soldiers and horses in their tracks." He had been dispatched to stand guard here. It was actually quite boring, and he just happened to encounter someone who admired him. Thus, even if this was only a junior, he could still help him pass some time. "Is senior here to hunt immortal beasts?" Ling Han feigned ignorance. "Hee, you don't understand." The middle-aged man shook his head. "What I shot down earlier is called rock chi. According to legend, when the heaven and earth first split, the source beast, the rock, was born here. Thus, even if the rock has long since died, there would still be rock chi gushing out here. What is the use of it?" Ling Han still pretended to be very foolish and naive. The middle-aged man wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He glanced at Ling Han and then clapped his head, saying, "If you were a woman, I would have suspected your motives. However, the Rock Palace does not accept male disciples, so you must have no relation with the Rock Palace. There is no harm telling you. Our 4 Seas Palace is presently besieging the Rock Palace, and destroying these rock chi is my mission. That can sever the source of power for the Rock Palace, and can also sever their fortune as well." The Rock Palace was a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force. The fact that the middle-aged man could personally come and participate in the battle to obliterate the Rock Palace would become something that he could be proud of in the future, and he would be able to boast about it for the rest of his life. The Rock Palace's circumstances had already deteriorated to this extent. Their enemies were already here destroying rock chi without the slightest reservations, which was equivalent to leaping on their heads, but the Rock Palace could not do anything about it. The circumstances were really extremely horrible. Ling Han continued trying to worm information out from the middle-aged man, and the latter was, firstly, bored and secondly, did not suspect any ulterior motives, and thought that since Ling Han was a man, he had to be unrelated to the Rock Palace. As long as it was nothing that touched on the top secrets of the Rock Palace, he just talked to his heart's content. However, even if he wanted to leak out those secrets, it would be impossible. Immortal Palace tiers could be considered elite in a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force, but it was absolutely impossible for them to be involved in any top-secret matters. After chatting for a long time, Ling Han wanted to leave, but the middle-aged man still persistently held on to him, and talked about his past glories. His interest in talking was very high, and he talked for over 2 days. Only then was the middle-aged man finally willing to let Ling Han leave. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. He had actually encountered a chatterbox. The rock palace was naturally highly renowned in the rock heaven. Ling Han only had to make some casual inquiries, and easily found out the way to the rock palace. After about a month, he finally arrived at the foot of the mountain beneath the rock palace. On his way here, he had also seen a great many people who were shattering rock chi like the middle-aged man, showing that the rock palace's present situation was really one of great peril. Ling Han did not directly ascend the mountain, because he couldn't. There was presently an army that was unleashing a fierce offensive at the mountain entrance. He was initially stunned, but then relaxed because these troops were not powerful. The strongest among them was only at the ascending origin tier. Was an ascending origin tier not strong enough? In other forces, an ascending origin tier was indeed strong, and overwhelmingly strong at that. However, both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace were Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier forces. Celestial Kings numbered in the hundreds, an ascending origin tier really could not be considered all that powerful. Thus, this was only a clash of ascending origin tier against ascending origin tier, which meant that this was just a small-scale skirmish, and neither side had gotten really serious yet. True enough, this battle only lasted 3 days before ending, and both sides withdrew their own troops. Ling Han still could not pass, because the Four Seas Palace had sealed off the path of entry into the Rock Palace. Neither exit nor entry was possible. Previously, hearing the situation that Hu Niu had described, the circumstances had not been as grim as this. Though the Four Seas Palace had penetrated into the rock heaven, it had not reached the extent that their swords were aimed directly at their main doors, but now it looked like they were close to eliminating the Rock Palace in a single move. What to do now? Ling Han thought for a moment, and came up with an idea. When the Four Seas Palace launched an offensive the next time, he would pretend to be a soldier on the side of the Four Seas Palace and sneak in. After he had rushed out of the area the Four Seas Palace had sealed off, he would then reveal his true identity, and then he would be able to enter into the Rock Palace. But in that way, if he wanted to leave, his path would be paved with great difficulty. He had already exposed his face. If he wanted to come back out again, would the Four Seas Palace easily let him pass? Who cared? He would just enter first, and then think about other things later. He waited patiently, and a mere 7 days later, the Four Seas Palace once again released a new wave of attacks. Charge! Ling Han called out loudly, mingling with the troops of the Four Seas Palace. In any case, he was a man, so there would definitely be no one who would suspect that he was on the side of the Rock Palace. Chapter 21-28. Looking for someone familiar. This was yet another small-scale skirmish. Ascending Origin tier elites would deliver a token assault, and Immortal Palace tier, Dividing Soul tier, and Severing Mundane tier Celestials would be tailing behind them. However, there was an extremely large number of troops, displaying the detailed power of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier level force. Ling Han ran with the masses, calling out loudly a few times. Seeing the exaggerated expression on his face, others would think that he had some kind of deadly grudge against the Rock Palace. Brother, we are just cannon fodder, and this is above our pay grade. You don't have to be so serious, right? Someone by his side could not bear to watch. How were they supposed to live with that? Really? Ling Han chuckled. My mistake, my mistake. I overperformed. That's right. As the saying goes, the hunter will shoot the bird that sticks out. With you shouting and howling like this, if you were spotted by those damn women from the Rock Palace, they may lock onto you and hunt you down. Do you think that you are as strong as a Dividing Soul tier? This person was well aware of the pros and cons. Ling Han's purpose was actually just to attract the attention of those damn women. There were a great many people that had welcomed Hu Niu back to the celestial realm. Only one of them needed to appear, and they would definitely be able to recognize him. Thus, he only kept a low profile for a while, and then immediately became energetic again, yelling and shouting loudly. The troops of both sides rapidly closed in on each other, and then erupted in a great battle. Basically, this kind of battle would take place in the air. Usually, Ascending Origin tiers would battle fiercely at the highest point, and then Immortal Palace tiers would be at a slightly lower point, followed by dividing soul tears, and finally it would be severing mundane tears at the lowest point. Basically, that was at a point that was just a few dozen meters above the ground. The environment here was extremely sturdy. Thus, even if a maximum-scale battle royale broke out here, it would still be unable to crumble the mountains. Otherwise, this place would have long since been flattened. Die, you villain! A woman from the Rock Palace had locked on Ling Han, a pair of wings flapping behind her back as she rapidly charged over towards Ling Han. Celestials could fly, and after she possessed this pair of wings, her speed had also considerably soared. Practically in just the blink of an eye, she had appeared in front of Ling Han, her sword waving out in a sweeping slash. Those with the bloodline of the rock were naturally experts of regulations of space. Ling Han had no intention of exposing himself. Thus, he merely condensed his origin power on his fist, and parried this strike. Pung! The two of them were sent flying backwards. Ling Han had naturally faked it. His figure turned, and charged towards another place, searching for a familiar face with his memory. Even if 10 million years had passed, including the time spent in the Black Tower, everything that had happened in the small world all those years ago were still vivid in his mind. As long as it was someone that had appeared then, he would definitely be able to recognize her. Don't even think of fleeing. He had not foreseen that that woman was extremely stubborn. Wielding her sword, she pursued him. She probably had seen how Ling Han had pushed his performance too far, and developed animosity towards him. Ling Han laughed, and naturally would not stop. Instead, he ran even faster. Just at this moment, a powerful feeling of danger rose up in him suddenly. He hurriedly stopped, and retreated madly. As expected, a gaze had focused on him. That was an Immortal Palace tier elite, who had especially descended downwards to kill such weaklings like himself. Just now, if Ling Han had not retreated backwards decisively, he would have probably suffered a powerful attack from the former. Watch the sword. The woman from before pursued him, her sword stabbing straight at the back of Ling Han's head. Ling Han parried carelessly, pretending to be stuck in a stalemate with the other in battle. Then, he guided the fight to circle around the battlefield endlessly as he continued to look for someone familiar. Brother, let's work together to kill her. Coincidentally, the person that had reminded Ling Han not to overperform actually charged over. His hands wielding a golden saber, 7 seals of great Tao already glowing on it, and endlessly exuding an aura of violence. His face was filled with killing intent as he brandished his saber in a slash towards that woman. How underhanded! The woman rebuked. She could only turn around and tap out a finger. A rock flew out, greeting the incoming blow from the golden saber. Pung! The rock crashed into the golden saber, instantly causing a burning light to erupt. Seals of great Tao rose up one after another, and a fierce collision took place. Then they cancelled each other out. Her figure trembled, and then 4 divided souls came out, boosting her battle prowess to the pinnacle. Ling Han had no intention of lingering in battle, and guided the battle into movement. This scene looked a little strange. It was clear that he together with the other person had the advantage in numbers, and this person was not weaker than the woman, yet it was he that was fleeing in panic and the woman that was chasing him, while his companion pursued that woman. Brother, what are you running for? The person pursuing behind the woman could not help but call out. Fuck you idiot! Ling Han cursed in his heart. This scene composed of the 3 of them was clearly off. It would be fine if you did not shout, but if you did, what were they supposed to do if they attracted the attention of others? It should be known that Ling Han had a halo of attracting trouble. Usually, even when he did not cause trouble, trouble would still come to him, so what more now? As expected, the eyes of an elite very quickly swept over, as sharp as a blade, causing Ling Han's skin to feel as if it was pricked. This was an Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This Immortal Palace tier elite had clearly become suspicious. Even if he did not suspect that Ling Han was a spy, he would think that Ling Han had cowered and planned to become a deserter. How would a deserter end up on the battlefield? There was a 99% chance they would be killed in front of the troops as an example to the rest and to stabilize the military morale. Ling Han was exasperated, and could only turn around to battle the woman. That Immortal Palace tier elite himself was still battling furiously, but a sliver of divine sense was tagged onto Ling Han. Probably, he would kill Ling Han first at all costs if Ling Han continued to be passive in battle. Immediately, the woman from the Rock Palace fell into a disadvantage. Her circumstances precarious. Haha, killing a dividing soul tier would mean 10 merit points, that companion of Ling Han declared, slightly excited. Clearly, while these 10 merit points were not a high reward, they seemed to be quite valuable. And that woman just hated Ling Han to death, so the focus of her assault concentrated on Ling Han, seeming like she was going to drag Ling Han down with her even if it meant her own death. Ling Han couldn't help but feel speechless. He had not unleashed even 10,000th of his own strength. Even if he did not fight back at all, his physique was nothing that the woman could penetrate anyways, so why go to all the trouble? He could not say these words directly, so he could only listlessly parry her blows. As long as that immortal palace tier no longer paid any attention to him, he would continue his search. But the circumstances of that woman from the Rock Palace were becoming more and more dangerous. She had already been struck a considerable number of times by the golden saber. Her body covered with wounds, and her aura had also begun to become unstable. Brother, I won't be reserved then. Ling Han's companion's eyes shone with vicious light, his saber slashing out at that woman's neck. He had the confidence that her head would be severed with this one slash, and when the power of regulation infiltrated her body, this enemy would instantly die. He was the one who had delivered the finishing blow, so the credit would naturally go to him. That woman could no longer dodge. She was harsh on herself as well. Instead of dodging, wielder and sword moved as one, increasing her speed as she stabbed towards Ling Han. What kind of brain did she have? Ling Han shook his head, stretching out his right hand, and picking her up by the back of her neck. Then, with a clap of his left hand, pung, the golden saber that was delivering a slash from behind was sent flying. Be brother. The person from Four Seas Palace looked at Ling Han in shock, his mouth twitching slightly. How could this guy be so strong? But why had he been running all the time previously? It was clear that he could have easily settled the battle just by turning around, right? And he had tried to snatch his credit, so would he then hold a grudge against him? Who exactly was he? Chapter 21-29. Intervention of a powerful figure. Ling Han broke into a smile. Sorry. He waved his hand again, and pung, that person from Four Seas Palace was sent flying with a strike, shooting through the air like a kite that had its line cut, and drawing out an elegant arc before finally dropping. He had not been too heavy-handed. Thus, that person soon scrambled back to his feet, his expression completely gobsmacked. You depraved villain, what are you trying to do? The woman that he had grabbed exclaimed loudly. This man had already injured his companion just to grab hold of her. Then, what kind of beastly acts did he plan to do to her? Don't worry. With your looks, you are very safe. I won't do anything to you, Ling Han said carelessly, and then broke out into a mad run. That immortal palace tier elite had been keeping an eye on him all this while, and now that he had suddenly turned traitor, he naturally would fly into a thunderous rage and make a move. As expected, that elite was just about to throw off his own opponent and make a move on Ling Han. But the Rock Palace elite's strength was extraordinary as well, keeping him entangled tightly in battle, leaving him no means of escape. Humph! The elite smirked coldly. Did he think that he could not do anything like this? He got a hand free, and tapped out a finger towards Ling Han. Ultimate Celestial Tap, he stated softly. Xiao, a streak of light shot rapidly towards Ling Han. This was a celestial technique that had been delivered from an immortal palace tier. It was definitely capable of insta-killing any dividing soul tier. Naturally, the Rock Palace elite that was fighting him could not possibly rescue an enemy. In any case, it was just a case of internal strife on the enemy side, so what did it have to do with her? She only sped up her attack, wanting to kill this powerful foe. Wang, a streak of light approached. This was the attack of an immortal palace tier. Even if it was not a full-powered blow, it was definitely not anything that a dividing soul tier could withstand. This light was like a fierce wave of obliteration. Fuck! Ling Han raised his hand and tossed the Rock Palace woman in his hands away, taking this attack on alone. Boom, a terrifying celestial light surged past. To a dividing soul tear, this was definitely fatal, and instantly submerged Ling Han within its light. The Rock Palace woman couldn't help but be dumbfounded with shock. In this kind of a situation, Ling Han had still thrown her away, and would rather die alone. What kind of true affection was this? Could it be that this was true love? She had not even finished the thought when the celestial light dispersed. Ling Han was standing there, completely unscathed, and merely a trace of blood was left at the corner of his lips. He didn't die. Involuntarily, she was shocked. That was the blow of an immortal palace tear, but Ling Han actually just bled a little from the corners of his mouth. What kind of frightening defense was this? Ling Han rubbed the corners of his lips. Just now, he had taken the initiative to channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, further improving the strength of his physique greatly. Even an immortal palace tear could not possibly kill him with a single blow. However, immortal palace tear was still immortal palace tear, after all. Ling Han was still in great pain all over his body, his organs practically close to exploding and shooting out from his body. As he saw it, this was very natural. In the first place, his physique was capable of ignoring any Heaven Soul level attack, so if he further channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, he would be able to temporarily further improve his defenses greatly. Thus, wasn't it very normal that he would be able to block the attack of an immortal palace tear? However, anyone who witnessed this scene all showed expressions of astonishment, involuntarily stopping their movements. The impact of this scene was really too great. Why has the fighting stopped? Someone was still brandishing his weapon madly, but no one attacked him even after a long while, causing him to feel completely baffled. Even Immortal Palace Tier and Ascending Origin Tier elites had noticed, especially Ascending Origin Tier elites. Their divine sense was too sensitive. All this while, this battlefield was grasped in the palms of their hands. If their side lost, they would withdraw their troops as soon as possible to prevent overly excessive losses. Interesting, an Ascending Origin Tier spoke up, and then stretched out a hand suddenly, grabbing out at Ling Han. This kind of elite was really frightening. His hand had just moved, and it had already appeared in front of Ling Han out of nowhere, grabbing downwards at him. Humph! There was no need for Ling Han to dodge. Yet another large hand struck out, and attacked the first giant hand. Boom, a third giant hand attacked, and then it was a fourth, then a fifth. It was like Ling Han had suddenly become an ultimate treasure. Everyone wanted to capture him. Indeed, the fact that a dividing soul tier managed to block the blow of an immortal palace tier was too astonishing. Anyone would feel curious. Ling Han! An incredibly crisp voice rang out, and a figure suddenly shot out from the mountains. It was Hunyo. Little mistress, behave yourself. A large hand stretched out, and grabbed hold of Hunyo, forcibly pulling her back. However, very quickly afterwards, this large hand extended once more, and appeared directly in front of Ling Han, completely ignoring all laws of space. Long Yueshi, aren't you dead yet? A soft exclamation sounded, and another large hand appeared, arriving in a sweep. Compared to the first giant hand that was wrinkled all over, the second giant hand was much better looking, smooth as jade and shining with a soft luster. While it looked delicate, it had a kind of nobility and grace in its delicate appearance. Pa! The two giant hands crashed together, and an intense collision immediately erupted in the regulations of the Great Tao. Endless celestial light filled the heavens, and even those stars in the skies had completely lost their color in this brilliance. Pa 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 pa! Everyone knelt down. Aside from Ling Han, no one could be the exception. This was a suppression on the level of essence. It was like they were facing the heaven and earth, and did not have the slightest sliver of ability to resist. A celestial king had moved. A massive power rippled out, and Ling Han was instantly tossed flying. The danger of death enshrouded him. He had a feeling that it was useless even if he could use rising from the ashes. This wild storm of energy would extinguish the flames of his revival in the next instant, and strike him completely into death and the underworld. Because this was the move of a celestial king, an existence that was above all others. He hurriedly used the mystical power of time of the Black Tower, boosting himself so that his own time could be sped up by 10,000 times, winning him the time to save himself. But even so, the wild storm of energy that was madly rushing towards him was still overwhelmingly fast. He hurriedly used the power of the 5-element source powers, forming a defensive shield in front of him. However, this was really only capable of mounting slight resistance. The protective wall immediately crumbled. In front of this storm of energy, it was not capable of even lasting a single blow. However, this had also finally garnered a sliver of time for him. Ling Han had completely finished the thought, and Xiao, his entire person immediately disappeared without a trace. He had entered the Black Tower. Boom, in the outside world, wild waves of energy surged madly, spilling out in a completely unbridled manner. Even lower-level celestial kings would be terrified at this. No, no, no. Even if a 9th heaven celestial king was here, he would still frown slightly. That was because both sides were too strong, both being overlord existences even among 9th heaven celestial kings. The Imperial Empress of Four Seas Palace, Shang Ji-wei. The Grand Elder of the Rock Palace, Long Yueshi. After the attack, Shang Ji-wei had already appeared. She had a tall, slender build, and wore white imperial robes. Her glossy hair was piled on the top of her head, appearing poised and noble. And she was also a rare beauty. Compared to the Empress and Hu Niu, she was only slightly inferior in beauty, but added with the domineering air she possessed as a 9th heaven celestial king, she definitely was in no way inferior to the two women. Long Yueshi, come out here to meet your death, she demanded coldly. Long Yueshi paid her no regard at all, and merely calmly stated, "Retreat! Coward!" Shang Ji-wei humphed. The other party had already avoided battle for a good many years, and Shang Ji-wei had already gotten used to it as well. It could not be helped. The other woman had sustained a Dao injury, and being able to live for so many years was already a very good fortune. If Long Yueshi went all out in battle, it was highly possible that the battle would be her last. That's not right. She was just about to wave her hand to signal for her troops to retreat as well when her eyes suddenly shone brightly, and swept a glance at the spot Ling Han had vanished. Long Yueshi, you almost had me fooled. Previously, though you have also avoided battle and hidden, you would not retreat as easily as this without a verbal battle at least. What are you trying to hide? Chapter 2130. Love Triangle. Shang Ji-wei's eyes swept over the spot. There was nothing in this world that could be hidden in front of her. A 9th heaven celestial king, from a certain aspect, was the manifestation of the regulations of heaven and earth, and could see through the essence of the heaven and earth. Her eyes focused on a single point, the expression on her face suddenly becoming excited. In fact, even her hands were trembling. Schwa, right at this moment, a large hand suddenly stretched out, directly scooped up that area, and then rapidly retreated into the depths of the mountains. If Shang Ji-wei had not been so excited that her mind had suddenly gone blank, there would have been absolutely no possibility that this large hand could have succeeded so easily. But now, it had caught her completely off guard. Long Yueshi. Shang Ji-wei flew into a thunderous rage abruptly, all her black locks raised skywards. Boom, 9 seals appeared on her body, each seal exuding a might that domineered the world. She was extraordinarily furious, as if she had become a demon. Her figure suddenly shot out as she set off in pursuit of the large hand. Pang! However, she had only pursued it for over 1,000 miles when a shield of light blocked her from advancing further. Even if she was a 9th heaven celestial king, so what? She had still stumbled back from the impact of her crash. He is Yuan Shang's heir. Shang Ji-wei roared in fury. Long Yueshi, give him back to me. Give back your head. The old woman's, Long Yueshi's, aged voice rang out. Shang Ji-wei, you have already lost in the past, so what is the point of you so earnestly struggling now? Now both Yi Yun and Yuan Shang have long since died, so what else can you not let go of? Without destroying the Rock Palace, I will not be able to let it go. Shang Ji-wei declared harshly. As long as you and the brand of that B*TCH are still alive, I will definitely not give up. Attention to all members of the Rock Palace. She suddenly calmed down, her expression frighteningly cold. Whoever unlocks the formation for me, and allows me entry, I can appoint her as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. Additionally, I only want the lives of 2 people. One is Long Yueshi, and the second is Tianyun. As long as the others do not resist, I can leave you alone. In fact, it is also possible for you to join the Four Seas Palace. After these words were out, a wave of commotion swept through both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace. Previously, Shang Jiwei had clearly shown that she wanted to slaughter every single member of the Rock Palace. Surrender? She did not accept it. As long as they bore the name of the Rock Palace, she would kill all of them. Yet now, a complete reversal of her attitude had actually taken place. She only wanted the lives of Long Yueshi and Hu Niu. This was practically... She had gone mad. But when a ninth heaven celestial king made a promise in public, it was like the heavens were speaking. They would live up to their word, or they would be abandoned by the Tao of heaven and earth, their battle prowess dropping greatly. Which also meant that this promise from Shang Jiwei was absolutely true. Why? The only thing that had changed was that she had suddenly discovered Ling Han's identity. He was the heir of some guy called Yuan Shang. What relationship did she have with this Yuan Shang? At this moment, the people of both palaces were both stunned and curious. This was the gossip of of 3 ninth heaven celestial kings. In your dreams, Long Yueshi declared coldly. Don't forget. This great protective formation has been personally laid down by Yuan Shang. Even after millions and millions of epochs, it would still exist for eternity, protecting our rock palace. Hee hee. Shang Jiwei did not answer, and merely responded with a cold smirk. She had completely gotten her emotions back under control. With a flick of her sleeves, she turned and left. In the rock heaven, Long Yueshi's aged face showed a solemn expression. Previously, Shang Jiwei had been extremely patient, wanting to slowly dry up the source of power of the rock heaven, and sever the rock palace's foundations. Then, even if they had a supreme protective formation sheltering, the rock palace would still become a pool of stagnant water, deteriorating from the inside out. But now that she had found out who Ling Han was, her patience had also instantly disappeared completely. Sigh, why had Ling Han come now with such a coincidental timing? With a flash, Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Ling Han! Hu Niu pounced over, and hung on Ling Han like a koala. Ling Han patted the little girl's head and said, "Where are the others? Are they all right?" Stupid Ling Han. You only care about other people. You don't care about Niu. Hu Niu complained, biting Ling Han's neck. The others are perfectly fine, Long Yueshi continued, and then shook her head. Sigh, what an ill-fated relationship. Senior, exactly what is behind all this? Ling Han asked. Though he was inside the Black Tower, he had still heard the exchange between Shang Jiwei and Long Yueshi. It seemed that the feud between the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace was not because of contesting over territory, but had rather originated from a romantic conflict. Long Yueshi sighed a few times again, and then said, "All right then. Since you managed to enter the Rock Palace all by yourself, which has proven your strength, as well as proven your good fortune, I will tell you. In the past, Shang Jiwei, Tianyun, and Yuan Shang had both fought alongside each other, grown together, and were very close with one another. Tianyun is the last imperial empress of the Rock Heaven, and she is also Yi Yun." It's Hu Niu. Hu Niu interrupted her in irritation. She had never accepted the name of Yi Yun. Long Yueshi smiled, and then said, Hu Niu's body contains the martial brand that was left behind by Tianyun. She will be able to inherit Tianyun's martial foundations in the future. Perhaps she may even be able to exceed Tianyun's limits, and step onto a completely new height. Heavenly Venerable Tier. Ling Han continued. Long Yueshi nodded. Yuan Shang is the master that you have never met, but you have cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and thus you are his true disciple. Yuan Shang is supremely talented, and was the strongest prodigy of that era. Both Shang Jiwei and Tianyun fell in love with Yuan Shang, and Yuan Shang ultimately chose Tianyun, causing Shang Jiwei to feel resentment. Not only did she become enemies with Tianyun, she has also attacked Tianyun repeatedly. However, Yuan Shang ultimately successfully became a heavenly venerate, and no matter what Shang Jiwei tried, it would only be wasted effort. For the sake of their previous relations, Yuan Shang didn't do anything to Shang Jiwei, either. However, following Yuan Shang's death, Shang Jiwei also became very extremist, and thought that it was Tianyun who had caused Yuan Shang's death. She suddenly delivered a fatal strike when Tianyun had sustained injuries in the resistance against the storm of darkness and returned, ultimately leading to Tianyun's death. She also wanted to destroy the Rock Palace, but thankfully, with the powerful formation laid down by Yuan Shang, she was not able to take one step over the boundaries. I too have sustained fatal Dao injuries in the resistance against the force of darkness, but for the sake of the juniors of this palace, I can only struggle and keep holding on. When Hunyo matures, I will then be able to leave with an easy heart. As it turned out, it was a love triangle. Love had turned to hatred, and caused very good sisters to turn hostile against one another and become enemies. It was a little cliché. A great and noble ninth heaven celestial king had actually died because of this. It was a little wasted. Senior, how did Senior Yuan Sheng die? Ling Han asked. That was a heavenly venerate, already superior over heavenly Dao itself, so why had he still died? I am not very sure about that myself, but it involves 3 supreme existences. Their names cannot be spoken of. Long Yueshi said solemnly. Even if she was a ninth heaven celestial king, she still showed an expression of reverence and fear. Heavenly Venerate. Could it be that it was the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and the other great supreme elites that had joined forces to kill the karmic life Heavenly Venerable? But why? There was clearly an invasion of the storm of darkness, so they should have been united instead. If it was claimed that the 3 great Heavenly Venerates had turned traitor, that would be even more impossible. Now, it was just the 3 of them that were Heavenly Venerates. Wasn't opening the 2-realm passageway, and allowing the people of the foreign realm to march straight and unchallenged an incredibly simple matter? Who could stop them? Ling Han realized that though he knew more of the truth, it was practically of little help in solving the mystery. Chapter 2131. Breaking Through to Earth Soul. No wonder Shang Jiwei had suddenly gone mad. It was because she had discovered the heir of her old love. More importantly, this heir of her old love was actually running towards the Rock Palace. This naturally made her want even more to raze the Rock Palace to the ground. What gave them the right? She was no match for Tianyun, and now, even in the next generation, she could not win over Tianyun's reincarnation. Go and rest first. Long Yueshi waved a hand, a sliver of weariness seeping from her gaze. She had already struggled wearily for countless years, and this time, Shang Jiwei had changed her mind. It was highly possible that it would really shake the Rock Palace's foundations. In the past, they could only gather together, and endure the tribulations together. That was because all of them would share the same fate of death if the Rock Palace were to be conquered. But now, this compromise from Shang Jiwei immediately caused a great many people to lose the motivation to fight hard. If Long Yueshi was in a good condition, or Hunyo matured and reached 7th heaven or 8th heaven celestial king tier, then everyone would still have the confidence to hold on. However, Long Yueshi was already at the end of her line, and Hunyo was still who knew how many years away from the celestial king tier. How were they supposed to hold on during such days when there were practically no future prospects that could be seen? Moreover, Shang Jiwei had even promised that whoever unlocked the great formation of the Rock Palace would be appointed as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. This naturally was a massive temptation. There was pressure as well as temptation. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be any traitors. Thus, Long Yueshi had to keep a closer watch. Otherwise, if they lost the protection of the Heavenly Venerable Tier Great Formation, Shang Jiwei would be able to penetrate straight into their heart. With her present battered body, Long Yueshi was definitely no match for Shang Jiwei. Ling Han, come play. Hunyo was simple-minded. Even if the mountain entrance was under siege, she was still casual and careless, completely unconcerned about it. Ling Han pulled her hand and asked, "Where are my parents?" "Oh, they are in a small town 10,000 miles away from here," Hunyo answered casually. Are they all right?" Ling Han was slightly nervous. After all, 10,000 years had already passed. If his parents had not raised their cultivation level, they would have long since died of old age. They're fine, Hunyo replied with a smile. They are both in the Genesis tier already. She blinked at Ling Han. Immediately, Ling Han understood. This little girl had given a lot of special attention to his parents. Otherwise, with the aptitude of his parents, it should not have been possible for them to advance to the Genesis tier, especially in as short a period of time as 10,000 years. He gave Hunyo a thumbs up as a symbol of encouragement. Hunyo was immediately pleased with herself, gladly accepting Ling Han's praise. What about Luan Xing and the others? Ling Han asked further. Hunyo immediately blinked her eyes, looking shifty. Ling Han sighed and asked, "What have you done again?" Hee hee. Hunyo laughed guiltily. As expected, Hunyo was still a jealous and petty lover. The moment Lu Herong had brought them back to the rock heaven, she had imprisoned the Empress, bewitching Maiden Ro, and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Thus, she was naturally guilty now that Ling Han was asking about them. You mischievous little girl. Ling Han was speechless. Reluctantly, she released the Empress and the others. Hunyo almost came to blows with the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han was there to play mediator, and taught Hunyo a good lesson. Only then was the dispute finally concluded. Ling Han looked at the Empress and Hunyo. This made him think of the love triangle between Yuan Shang, Tian Yun, and Shang Jiwei. If he did not deal with matters appropriately, perhaps the circumstances in the future would also evolve to that situation. He wanted to see his parents, but because they were under siege from the troops of the Four Seas Palace, no one could enter or exit, so how was he supposed to leave? Fortunately, the Rock Heaven was an ancient great sect, and was incredibly wealthy. There was a severing mundane tier mystery realm in the mountains of the Rock Heaven, and there was also a Yang Soul Ocean, Yin Soul Valley, Earth Soul Mountain, and Heaven Soul Pool. You wanted to break through to the Immortal Palace tier? There was also an Immortal Palace tier mystery realm here, so it was absolutely no problem. Ascending to Celestial King tier was the only exception. In that case you could only walk the celestial path. Since they could not leave for the moment, Ling Han thus decided to first break through to Earth Soul. He had already attained the conditions for breaking through. However, the Rock Palace did not have the custom of accepting male disciples. In fact, they did not even welcome males to stay temporarily here, but Ling Han could not leave. Thus, whenever he walked out, he would be the target of peculiar looks from the disciples of the Rock Palace. Hunyo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro had all broken through before him. Not only had they broken through to Earth Soul, they had even already crossed over to the threshold of Heaven Soul. Ling Han then gave the heavenly sun black gold and purple spirit flames to the two women, allowing them to pick first, and then collect it for their own. Whether they could or not would be up to the two women's own good fortune. The Empress chose the heavenly sun black gold, while Hunyo chose the purple spirit flames. They entered into the Black Tower, and communicated with these two source powers of heaven and earth. With the time acceleration effects of 1,000-fold, they could take it slow and easy. Meanwhile, Ling Han headed towards the Earth Soul Mountain. At first, the Earth Soul Mountain did not belong to the Rock Palace, but the Source Beast Rock used its mighty strength to move the whole mountain here. From then onwards, the disciples of the Rock Palace would be able to advance to Earth Soul without taking a step outside. The real Earth Soul Mountain pierced straight into the clouds, hundreds of thousands of meters tall, but the rock was an expert of regulations of space. With it using a mighty technique to make some adjustments, the Earth Soul Mountain had been perfectly assimilated into the mountains when looking from the outside. Only when one set foot on it would one realize that this mountain was far higher than it looked. Ling Han arrived at the foot of the mountain. He raised his head and glanced upwards, and then began his ascent. All 4 levels of the dividing soul tier would need a specific item to become the container for a divided soul. However, a freak like Ling Han could use the source powers of heaven and earth to condense his 5th divided soul and so on. In that case, there was no need for so much trouble. There was no container or mystery realm like that in this world, either. The container for the Earth Soul tier, Truffle Crystal, was only produced on Earth Soul Mountain, and once it left the mountain, it would disappear. This was a restriction of heaven and earth, and no one could keep it in abundance. Of course, there were good and bad truffle crystals. This was mainly reflected in their height. The higher the altitude, the higher the quality of a discovered truffle crystal would be. Thus, Ling Han did not stop at all as he climbed towards the summit. This mountain repelled all cultivators above Yin Sol, and those below Celestial King tier could not enter. If a Celestial King were to forcibly barge in, this mystery realm would be burst and destroyed, being completely unable to sustain the great might of a Celestial King. Thus, even if you asked for someone else's help in the matter of retrieving truffle crystals, they could only be Yin Sols as well. Ling Han climbed the mountain as if he was walking on flat ground. Every 30,000 meters or so, he would encounter a barrier. It was formed by the mystical power of heaven and earth and manifested in human form. It guarded the passage, and he could only continue his advance after defeating it. The Source Beast Rock had not just simply moved this mystery realm here, but had used supreme methods to make slight adjustments so that the difficulty level of each stage had been considerably weakened. Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. With a single punch from him, he instantly resolved all his battles. He had already been capable of matching a Heaven Soul Long when he had been a Yang Soul. When the great clash of source powers exploded, it could even pose a threat to Heaven Soul Monarch tiers. This kind of battle prowess was naturally incredibly terrifying. Hence, could a Yin Soul level barrier be capable of becoming a dilemma for him? At the last 30,000-meter barrier, the human-shaped monster that was on guard had finally attained the standard of an Earth Soul Monarch tier, but Ling Han still managed to defeat it easily. He arrived at the summit. There were truffle crystals that were the size of a human head here, and it was also the best quality. Ling Han took one, and with a thought, the fiery flame lightning strike would immediately surged out of his dantian, entering into the truffle crystal. From the outside, there was a sapling spreading out its slender branches inside the translucent crystal, and there were vague flickers of flames and lightning. Chapter 2132. Formation Breaks. Ling Han began breaking through to Earth Soul. Over the last 10,000 years, he had been focused on studying the 5-element source powers, and under the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, that time had been further extended to 10 million years. In this process, he naturally gained a very deep, profound understanding of the essence of the Tao of heaven and earth. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. It was very rare for even celestial kings to gain even one, so they were naturally wondrous. The cultivation level barrier was very soon broken through. This was only a minor level. For a prodigy like Ling Han, it was naturally unable to cause any kind of difficulty. Long, tribulation clouds began gathering densely in the skies, and the heavenly tribulation came as promised. At first, Ling Han wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to break free of the siege by the Four Seas Palace so he could go and visit his parents, Helian Xuanxue, and the others. With the boost of heavenly tribulation, who would dare stop him? But upon further thought, he dismissed this idea. The heavenly tribulation would only last half a day. They only had to follow him, and make their move after the heavenly tribulation dispersed. By then what could he do? Under tempering from the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's physique gained a certain amount of improvement. However, there was not much use now with just the heavenly tribulation alone. Ling Han would have to further exploit the profound secrets of the indestructible heaven scroll. He endured this heavenly tribulation very easily. Half a day later, he packed up and returned. However, a storm was brewing inside the Rock Palace, and the core of the problem was him. The Rock Palace did not make disciples, nor did they entertain male guests. Having Ling Han here was clearly unjustified. Thus, a seventh heaven elder raised a suggestion, discussing the matter of expelling Ling Han from the Rock Palace. What? When Ling Han found out, he appeared incredibly stunned. Things had already come so far, and some old women were actually still in the mood to discuss this problem. Had their brains been kicked by a donkey? However, his cultivation level was low, and he had no status, so no one would be concerned about his opinion. Not many people knew that Ling Han was actually the heir of a heavenly venerate, just like not many people knew that Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable was actually the bestowed title of a heavenly venerate, and that was the same for Yuan Shang. Otherwise, the heir of a heavenly venerate was still very scary, though the karmic life heavenly venerable had long since passed away. In the end, it was Long Yueshi who had stepped out, and said that extreme times called for extreme measures, suppressing all disagreements. As Ling Han saw it, this was definitely not a disturbance that was only directed at him. A group of celestial kings were discussing the going or staying of a dividing soul tier behind closed doors. You got to be kidding. Even if they were presently trapped inside the Rock Palace, they were not as bored as that. There were traitors within the Rock Palace. Ling Han had long since guessed this when they had been ambushed on the sea, and now with such an event happening, he definitely did not believe that it was a mere accident or coincidence. However, Ling Han could not do much. Long Yueshi should have long since deduced that there was a traitor in the palace. If she had not done anything to stay on guard, she would not have deserved to be a ninth heaven celestial king. Ling Han also came to know that there was no eighth heaven celestial king in the rock heaven. Thus, beneath Long Yueshi, there were two seventh heaven celestial kings that had the highest authority. Long Yueshi could die at any moment. These two seventh heaven celestial kings were responsible for the duty of assisting, guiding, and protecting Hunyeo. They were also figures that possessed considerable power within the Rock Palace. These two celestial kings were Elder Fuyun and Elder Sanha. Elder Fuyun was the more radical of the two, and had a very strong thirst for power, while Elder Sanha was completely focused on cultivation, and belonged to the type that was more unconcerned. This time, it was Elder Fuyun that had brought up the matter of Ling Han's expulsion from the Rock Palace. As a great seventh heaven celestial king, how could she bring herself to do it? There was something off with this old woman. Ling Han immediately concluded so internally, but the other party had high status and great power, so how could she be displaced merely with a few words from him? Of course, Hunyeo would definitely listen to him, but would the other people listen to Hunyeo? Hong long long. He felt a resounding boom sound in his ears, as if the heaven and earth had crumbled. What's going on? How dare you? Long Yueshi's voice rang out, filled with fury. Ha ha ha, Fuyun Celestial King, well done. Shang Jiwei's voice sounded as well. From today onwards, you will be the Vice-Imperial Empress of our Four Seas Palace. Instantly, Ling Han's heart jolted. He had just been thinking that there was something off with this old woman, but he had not thought that something would happen so fast. The Great Mountain Protective Formation had been opened. Multiple battleships were seen appearing in the skies, casting dark shadows, just like casting a shadow on the hearts of the members of the Rock Palace. Why has the Great Mountain Protective Formation been unlocked? Could it be that it was Elder Fuyun? Nonsense, didn't you hear Shang Jiwei's words? I say, the Four Seas Palace only wants Yun and the Grand Elder, so why should we put our lives on the line? Why don't we just surrender to the Four Seas Palace? That's right, even if we don't side with the Four Seas Palace, we can completely leave without any reservations. Why should we cling to a rock that is destined to sink like the Rock Palace and die alongside it? Everyone was conversing spiritedly. Some were incredibly stunned, while there were others that were advising people to surrender. Ling Han heard all this, and finally understood that the meeting previously was only a pretense. Its purpose was to allow those that wished to surrender to have an exchange of words, to achieve some kind of agreement. And now, as Fuyun Celestial King had unlocked the Great Mountain Protective Formation, the others became lobbyists, speeding up the destruction of the Rock Palace. Long Yueshi, today will be the day of your death. Shang Jiwei's figure appeared, standing proudly in the air, but her exquisitely beautiful figure was exuding an air of supreme dominance, like an ultimate empress. It is only a battle. Long Yueshi appeared, similarly standing proudly in the air. She wielded a purple walking cane in her right hand. Though she looked aged and decrepit, the aura she exuded was no weaker than Shang Jiwei's. It is not determined yet who will live or die. You are already at the end of your line, and you still dare speak tough. Shang Jiwei said disdainfully. Now that the heavenly venerable tier Great Formation had been opened, the Rock Palace was only a piece of cake in her eyes. The others may be spared as long as you put down your weapons. The reincarnation of Tianyun must be captured, and this person. She extended a finger and tapped at the empty air, showing Ling Han's image. This boy must not be harmed. Whoever touches a hair on his head, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Everyone was immediately stunned. Wasn't this the person who had fled into the rock palace not too long ago? Why had he now gotten a connection with Shang Wei? She actually said that not a single hair on his head was to be touched? Could it be that this was her illegitimate son? Though they were shocked, the members of the Four Seas Palace at least had to abide by her words strictly. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. The members of the Four Seas Palace all shouted. If they could win the battle without fighting, they naturally would not wish to risk their lives in battle. After all, there were not many battle maniacs like Ling Han. Most people cultivated because they desired status, power, and wealth. Meanwhile, the members of the Rock Palace were at a loss. So should they fight or not? The great mountain protective formation that was like a great wall had already been conquered, and the Grand Elder was definitely no match for Shang Wei. Either otherwise they would not have stuck to a defensive strategy, being beaten on by their enemies all this while. Then, if the result was destined to be their defeat, what would be the point of further battle? Those that had long since borne the intent of betrayal immediately threw down their weapons. Now that they had started, a great many people who were indecisive immediately followed their lead, and put down their weapons. There was less than 1/10 of people that were willing to be loyal to the Rock Palace to the death. Long Yueshi couldn't help but sigh. Though she had stayed on guard against any betrayal in the ranks, she had never thought that it would be someone like Celestial King Fuyun. This was the strongest person next to herself, and she had also placed high hopes on the latter. When she died, the Rock Palace would be temporarily delegated under her leadership. She raised her voice and announced, "All disciples, put down your weapons. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace is disbanded." This was cutting their losses. As long as Hunyo could grow to become a ninth heaven celestial king in the future, then the Rock Palace would be able to rise up again one day. Otherwise, there was no need for unnecessary sacrifice. Chapter 2133. Going all out in battle. This move of Long Yueshi was cutting their losses. Did she want to have the Rock Palace disbanded? Of course she didn't. However, if the Rock Palace was not disbanded, without the protection of the heavenly venerable Tia formation, all of them would be completely slaughtered by the Four Seas Palace. It could not be helped. Their ninth heaven celestial king was stronger. In the celestial realm, top-tier battle prowess could completely determine the outcome of a battle. It could be claimed that everyone else of the Four Seas Palace could die, but as long as Shang Wei was still there, she could still easily eliminate the Rock Palace. What more when the scales were now leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace? Thus, protecting what power they had to wait for a day when they could rise up again was the wisest decision to make. Grand Elder. Immediately, countless members of the Rock Palace called out, filled with defiance and fury, wanting nothing more than to commit murder with their eyes alone. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest meaning. Ding ding ding. More and more people threw their weapons on the ground, and then chose to leave. Only a small minority were still gripping their weapons tightly, determined to battle, and would rather die than surrender. Stupid stubbornness. The members of the Four Seas Palace launched a fierce offensive. The outcome of this battle was already out. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace would cease to exist. Destroying the representative force of the Rock Heaven filled every single member of Four Seas Palace with adrenaline. From this day onwards, their names would be eternally written in history to be admired by later generations. Long Yueshi, I will be sending you on your way today. Shang Wei also unleashed an offensive. If she wanted to kill Tianyun's reincarnation, she would have to get rid of Long Yueshi first. And once Long Yueshi has fallen, the Rock Palace would really be completely destroyed, becoming nothing but another page in history. Long Yueshi gazed meaningfully at Shang Wei. Her initially hunched back gradually straightened, her white locks fluttering. They were actually rapidly turning black in color. Originally, she was very short, but as her back straightened, her figure actually became the same height as a normal human. No, it was even straighter and taller. This was not something as simple as straightening her back, but rather that her whole person's height had been increased greatly. A mountain wind blew past, and Long Yueshi's hair fluttered. It had turned completely black, beautiful and glossy like clouds. Looking at her face, What part of her still looked like an old woman? Instead, she was an exquisite beauty that was in the prime of her youth. Her waist was slender, her breasts bountiful, and her legs long and straight, while her skin was as smooth as jade. Her beauty was not the slightest bit inferior to Shang Jiwei's. Long Yueshi, you are finally going to stop fleeing? Shang Jiwei smirked coldly. In the past, she had also been a supreme beauty, and one whose natural talent was astounding. Naturally, her youth should have been eternal, and she would never age. However, she had sustained a serious Dao injury, and she had no choice but to focus all her energy on suppressing her wounds, causing her beauty to age and herself to look like an old woman. And now, Long Yueshi had decided to go all out in battle, forcibly pushing her condition to her strongest prime, so it was natural that her beauty would be restored. However, this would also be her final battle. Even if Shang Jiwei did not fight her when she exited this state, she would also decline rapidly after her prime. Her Dao injury would take effect, and she would die. Shang Jiwei naturally would not give up the battle. With how proud she was, and after accumulating so many years of fury, how could she be satisfied if she did not kill her enemy with her own hands? It is just a battle. Long Yueshi was very grand and majestic, naturally exuding the aura of one who dominated the whole world. 4 ninth heaven celestial kings like themselves, they were just that slightest bit away from advancing to the heavenly venerable tier. Thus, it was natural that they were all incredibly assertive. However, this slight gap could not be filled no matter how much they tried. Hence, ninth heaven celestial kings were only celestial kings. Shang Jiwei gave a battle cry, and her figure flew furiously as she charged towards Long Yueshi. 9 seals shone brilliantly on her body, representing that she was a supreme empress that was practically unmatched in this world. She did not dare to underestimate Long Yueshi in the slightest, and still summoned an ancient mirror. It floated behind her, shooting out multiple streaks of light. When these streaks of light landed on her, they could further improve her battle prowess, and when they landed on Long Yueshi, they could weaken the battle prowess of her opponent slightly. This was the inheritance treasure of the Four Seas Palace, Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror, a ninth heaven celestial tool. There was no difference in strength between divine metals, but once it was forged into celestial tools, there would be a difference in power. How could it be that the celestial tool that was forged by a first heaven celestial tool would be capable of matching one that was forged by a ninth heaven celestial king? This Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was forged by assimilating the martial intent of the generations of elites of the Four Seas Palace accumulated through the secret techniques of as many as 3 ninth heaven celestial kings, so its power was naturally extraordinary. It could definitely be considered as a ninth heaven celestial king by itself. In Shang Jiwei's hands, the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was naturally fully activated. There was no need to expend any power belonging to Shang Jiwei herself, and it could attack automatically. Long Yueshi humped, and spread open her arms. A majestic light flew out from the mountains, towards her. It only stopped when it had almost reached her. Upon a closer look, this was a suit of armor. Rock armor. In the past, when the rock had attained great accomplishment in its cultivation level, it had plucked out a tendon, a bone, and a horn from its own body, and fused them with 7 divine metals to forge this armor. After further going through endless refinement of 3 generations of ninth heaven celestial kings, it had naturally become a ninth heaven celestial tool. Wang, the rock armor automatically covered Long Yueshi's body. An ancient seal shone, and immediately exuded boundless might. Celestial chi diffused, blocking the blazing light of the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror. It could not bear the slightest effect on Long Yueshi anymore. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 great ninth heaven celestial kings began an intense battle. Even the dome of heaven was trembling. Stars that were in the proximity were struck down, turned into bits of rock that fell from the skies, and those stars that were further could not escape, either. However, they simply fell whole from the skies. Multitudes of stars dropped, and the landing of one could blast out a great ocean. Naturally, many lives were lost. When celestial kings fought, it was like doomsday had come. What more when it was a ninth heaven level great battle? Just think, when the force of darkness had invaded in the past, countless celestial kings had burst out into great battle. In fact, even the entirety of the rock heaven had been struck to the point of breaking apart from the celestial realm, and falling into the void. Beneath them, everyone was stunned for a moment before starting the battle again. Amidst sounds of fighting, the members of the Rock Palace fell against the masses. They were outnumbered. The gap was too overwhelming. But there were some that still could not let it go. It was clear that they would be able to live as long as they gave up resistance, but they still chose to fight to the bitter end. Blood sprayed, and it was a tragic sight. Ling Han never feared battle, but now he did not know what he was supposed to do. This was not his battle. Even if he was leaning more in favor of the Rock Palace because of Hu Niu, to ask him to suddenly raise weapons against people he did not even know at all was still something that was very, very difficult for him. He lacked the desire to battle to ignite his fighting spirit. Run! Long Yueshi's voice rang out in his mind. Bring Yi Yun with you and flee. Run as far as you can. From now onwards, I will entrust Yi Yun to you. Ling Han came back to his wits. Hu Niu was still inside the Black Tower, and while this precious treasure was very awesome, could it really block a ninth heaven celestial king? He did not have the slightest hesitation, and ran towards the foot of the mountain with an abrupt turn. Halt! A dividing soul tier of the Four Seas Palace stood in his way. Young master, please wait for a moment. I am sure that the Lady Imperial Empress has words to speak with you. Since Shang Jiwei had threatened that anyone who dared to touch a hair on Ling Han's head would be torn to pieces, it was clear how important Ling Han was. Thus, it was natural that he could not be allowed to leave. Moreover, Tianyun's reincarnation had not been found yet. She could be in anyone's spatial god tool, so it was even more natural that no one could be allowed to leave. Get lost! Ling Han shot out a punch. Pang! That person was instantly sent flying, becoming a tiny dot in the skies. Chapter 2134. Repeated defeats. However, that person had just been sent flying when another person came to block his way. Yet this time, it was an Immortal Palace tier. Immortal Palace tier against Dividing Soul tier meant an absolute domination, and there was no one that could be exempted. Thus, this person stood with his arms crossed behind his back, looking as confident as if he had everything under control. Young Master Ling, was it? Why are you in such a rush to leave? With Lady Imperial Empress being so concerned about you, perhaps you may become our young Imperial Emperor in future. Our Four Seas Palace is a first-class force in the celestial realm. This kind of honor and wealth is something that others would not even dare to dream of. Yet it is within arm's reach for you. I am really dying of envy. Ling Han laughed and said, Are you getting lost or not? If you aren't, then if I ever become that so-called young Imperial Emperor, the first head I will be cutting off would be yours. Would you believe me? Fuck! That Immortal Palace tier's face involuntarily twitched, with him feeling like he had shot himself in the foot. Immediately, the confidence in his expression had completely vanished. Indeed. With how highly Shang Jiwei prized Ling Han, even if she did not appoint Ling Han as young Imperial Emperor, the title of Holy Son or something of sort was definitely possible. And the other man was just a mere Immortal Palace tier, and could just barely be considered an elite in the Four Seas Palace. If Ling Han really wanted to make life difficult for him, who would be able to speak up on his behalf? Then should he just step aside? But what if the crime of letting Ling Han flee was placed on him, and Shang Jiwei blamed him? Would he be able to bear the consequences? Involuntarily, he was trapped in a tight spot, and felt incredible regret. If he had known, then he would have settled the matter just by knocking the other party out. Now that he had thrown out these words, he had also tossed the difficult problem in front of him. Taking advantage of the opening when this person was hesitating, Ling Han immediately channeled a movement technique, breaking into a run and fleeing. Young Master Ling, you had better stay. This person moved, grabbing out at Ling Han's shoulder. He had made his decision. Even if Ling Han wanted to make things difficult for him, it would only happen in the future. But if he allowed Ling Han to escape, then Shang Jiwei's punishment would be close at hand. He could only hate himself secretly for being so nosy and determined to run out, leading to the presently difficult situation. He faltered slightly because the space within 3,000 meters of him had all warped, as if it had become multiple mirrors, and there was a Ling Han in every single mirror. He knew that these had to be false images, but these false images were too real. Whether it was appearance or aura, there was not the slightest bit of difference from the original, reaching the point where he could not distinguish which one was the real one at all. Quite interesting, but don't you know that the gap in cultivation level between you and me is really too wide? The immortal palace tear humphed, and stretched out his right hand. A seal that looked like a fierce tiger lit up on the back of his hand. Boom! A shock wave rippled out. Pang pang pang! The warped space crumbled, and the Ling Han that was in them only trembled before shattering. It was only the time for a single breath, and the 3,000 meters wide mirror space had completely collapsed. As for Ling Han, that immortal palace tear realized, much to his shock, that this brat had actually appeared 1,000 miles away in the distance, moving so fast that he was about to run out of the range of his vision. What was going on? Right under his nose, Ling Han had actually managed to escape and flee. With a battle cry, the man's figure moved, and set off in rapid pursuit of Ling Han. In a few steps, he had already caught up with Ling Han. He once again stretched out his hand to grab him, intending to capture Ling Han. I won't believe this. A great immortal palace tear, and I still can't capture a dividing soul tear? Ling Han used the same trick again, using void space once more. Countless mirror images appeared. There were millions of him, and it was impossible to distinguish which one was real at all. I get it now. That immortal palace tear laughed loudly. Ling Han's void space actually surpassed the range of 3,000 meters, but Ling Han had deliberately limited its size, yet placed his true self outside of this range. Then, the opponent would be fooled by his first impression, and think that Ling Han was within this range. Then, even after he crumbled this space, he could still do nothing against Ling Han. Good one, brat, to actually use secret techniques as nimbly as this, what a prodigy. He had also gained the desire to cherish talent, yet knew very well that he was not qualified to take Ling Han as a disciple at all. Even a ninth heaven celestial king regarded Ling Han as very important, so what place did that leave him? With a burst of celestial power, the mirror space was immediately shattered once more, and while he was faltering, he saw that Ling Han had again appeared 1,000 miles away. Fuck. Being fooled once was forgivable, but he really should not have fallen for the same trick again. Was he an idiot? That immortal palace tear couldn't help but feel a sliver of anger. Ling Han had not changed his tricks at all. Yet, the 6,000-meter wide mirror space he had spread out now was still not his limit. Thus, he had once again managed to successfully deceive him. But would you be capable of escaping? Just how much weaker is the dividing soul tear compared to immortal palace tear? Even if you used all your techniques, so what? You still will not be able to escape from the palm of my hand. His figure streaked out again, and caught up with Ling Han for the third time. He stretched out his palm, and he did not change his strategy of attack, either. This was also a kind of pride. Ling Han smiled, and void space was spread out again. This time, it encompassed an area of 12,000 meters. I have already seen through your tricks, that immortal palace tear declared proudly. Boom, his large hand spread out, enshrouding a total of 24,000 meters in space. This is your limit, isn't it? The large hand pressed down, and all the images were immediately shattered. However, Ling Han's true self still did not appear. The immortal palace tear's expression immediately became incredibly dark, as if someone had delivered a harsh slap to his face. That was how embarrassing it was. Ling Han was still 1,000 miles away. This brat could actually unfold his mirror space for more than 12,000 meters. The immortal palace tear was really stunned. A mere Earth soul actually could control the regulations of space over such a large area. This was too unbelievable. Old Chen, just how many times have you moved? And you actually haven't been able to take down a mere dividing soul tear yet? Someone laughed derisively. This was a colleague from the Four Seas Palace, but their usual relations really could not be considered very amicable. Old Chen humphed, and with another step, he caught up once more with Ling Han, pulling him down with a hand. Come on then, I refuse to believe that your mirror space can have an even wider range than my attack range. However, he miscalculated. This time, Ling Han did not cast his mirror doppelgangers, but instead used the mirrors to advance rapidly. Added with a burst from the regulations of lightning, his speed reached a level that even immortal palaceteers would be moved at for an instant. He fled before Old Qian's attack landed, escaping by a hair's breadth. This time, even those ascending origin tiers cast their eyes over, locking down on Ling Han. This dividing soul tier was truly a little freakish. Holy Daughter and Ran is only like this as well, right? I thought that Holy Daughter and Ran would definitely become the next Imperial Empress, but if this brat joins our Four Seas Palace, with how freakishly talented he is, and added with how the Imperial Empress prizes him, it would definitely have a major impact on Holy Daughter and Ran. There is definitely going to be a good show to watch. The members of the Four Seas Palace all conversed spiritedly. The battle had essentially been decided. There were only a limited few that were still stubbornly resisting, allowing them to have enough free, leisurely time to interact. Ling Han did not flee any longer. Though he had successfully escaped from the hands of an immortal palace tier 4 times, and could do so even 5 or 10 times more, there would ultimately be a time when techniques could no longer be used. Hide into the Black Tower? That was a question. There were hundreds of celestial kings here, and when Shang Jiwei got a hand free, the power of a ninth heaven celestial king was even more unpredictable. Old Qian, do you just have this little bit of power? He laughed loudly, beginning to mock Old Qian. Old Qian's face was flushed red, feeling like there were countless eyes directed on him, and making him want nothing more than to find a hole that he could bury himself in. He moved once more, grabbing out towards Ling Han. Chapter 2135. Xiao Gu was also good at attracting animosity. Ya! A familiar call rang out, and a streak of light rapidly shot over. Old Qian was stunned, and had not even come back to his wits when pang, this streak of light had already crashed into his back. He was instantly harshly slammed into the ground, landing solidly. The speed of the light streak also decreased, and everyone could see it clearly. This was actually a snow-white bone. The bone floated in midair entwined by threads of light, slowly taking human form. Who else could it be but Xiao Gu? Ya! When Xiao Gu spotted Ling Han, he appeared very elated. Pretty girl, give me a smile. Milord, don't do anything foolish. Wife, our hoe should be sent for repair. Xiao Gu immediately began chattering and mimicking word after word, with completely no sign of stopping anytime soon. Everyone was watching in shock, dumbfounded. This bone had come in such an astonishing manner, but what was it actually blurting out now? Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed loudly. For these 10,000 years, who knew how many conversations Xiao Gu had listened in on? He was naturally feeling very suffocated, so how could he be satisfied without mimicking to his heart's content? Xiao Gu, help me escape, he said. Xiao Gu, help me escape, Xiao Gu said as well, his expression completely serious. Fuck! Ling Han sighed plaintively. Thus Xiao Gu was always undependable when it came to crucial moments. Humph, since you are already here, then both of you should stay behind. An ascending origin tier moved, grabbing at both Ling Han and Xiao Gu. Humph, since you are already here. Xiao Gu copied the words, stretching out his hand as well, and grabbing out at the other. Pang! The two hands crashed into each other, and the light of regulations exploded. The large hand that Xiao Gu had extended burst through the other's large hand on an unstoppable course, continuing the course to grab ahead. Not good! That ascending origin tier exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned around and fled. Not good! Xiao Gu did not realize that he was presently fighting another person at all. He too exclaimed in shock and turned and fled. This. Everyone watched this happen, their faces twitching madly. How could he play around with someone like that? That was going too far. That ascending origin tier wanted to throw up blood in his fury. If I can't match you, it would be due to my inferior strength, but you actually copy the way that I flee. What kind of horrible humiliation is that to me? This could not be tolerated. It was unacceptable. Ling Han rubbed his chin. Xiao Gu was clearly adorably dumb, But why could he instantly infuriate others to the extent that they would be hopping mad? If it had been the large black dog, that would have been logical. It was extraordinarily despicable by nature, and it would be nothing strange even if it managed to drive a celestial king to death with fury. Feng Tang stepped back. A figure descended from the skies, enshrouded in extraordinary light. A celestial king. That ascending origin tier hurriedly paid his greetings respectfully, and stepped aside. A celestial king, no matter which heaven they were at, was still a supreme being. Anyone who had not reached this level could only treat them with utter respect. That celestial king looked at Xiao Gu, and revealed an expression of shock. It was clearly only a bone, but why would it have such might? When a celestial king acted, they naturally had no reservations. Stretching out his hand, he grabbed out at Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu was in high spirits. With so many people playing with him, this was fun. He also stretched out his hand, copying the other's movement. Humph! That celestial king showed a hint of displeasure. I am a second heaven celestial king, and you think I am just any random minor character. Pang! The two hands crashed into one another, and one of them immediately crumbled. Unexpectedly, the hand that was shattered was actually the one that had been sent out by that celestial king. Boom! The large hand that Xiao Gu sent out continued to grab out at that celestial king. What? That celestial king exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned and fled. What? Xiao Gu imitated him to perfection, and also turned around and fled. This. Everyone's cheek was twitching. They felt that Xiao Gu was really too insulting. It's enough that you won, so why do you have to go so far? They were both celestial kings, and had cultivated to this kind of height, so how could they be so tasteless? Why were you? That celestial king had already turned around, fuming mad with fury. Why were you? Xiao Gu also bared his teeth, copying him to absolute perfection. This was too far, this was really going too far. To say nothing of the fact that the celestial king wanted to commit murder, even the others were shaking their heads continuously. How could he do that? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. That celestial king roared furiously, his expression twisted in anger. Men could be killed, but couldn't be insulted. A celestial king was noble and proud, standing equal to heaven and earth, so how could they be allowed to be slighted? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. Xiao Gu's expression was similarly twisted, and he was practically howling with fury. By now, he had improved further. Not only could he mimic words, he would also add in some input of expression, appearing to be even more exaggerated. Everyone was about to pass out. Not only were you mimicking others as mockery, you were even stealing their names. This would mean a deadly feud. Lu Feng. Another elite descended from the skies. 5-colored light enshrouded him, representing that he was a fifth heaven celestial king. Lord Wu Heng. The celestial king from before hurriedly greeted him respectfully. There were a total of 3 heavens between the two of them. He needed to maintain an attitude of absolute respect. Wu Heng nodded. His expression was slightly solemn. You are no match for this person. Lu Feng was a little defiant. Though he had fallen into a disadvantage in the previous clash, he still had a very strong confidence that if he went all out in battle, it would not be certain that he would lose. However, Wu Heng actually determined that he was no match for Xiao Gu so decisively, which made him feel very defiant. He stepped back, giving way to Wu Heng. Sir, you are really outrageously bold, to dare to interfere even in the matters of our 4 Seas Palace. Wu Heng said menacingly. Sir, you are really... Xiao Gu was extremely happy, mimicking as he liked, and driving others mad with fury. Wu Heng's expression involuntarily darkened. You are a celestial king yourself, so what is so fun about mimicking others like this? You are a... Xiao Gu's expression darkened even further, looking completely livid. Damn you! Wu Heng was furious. With a soft exclamation, he moved. Boom, endless immortal flames burned brightly and ferociously. He sent out a punch, an ancient seal of great Tao on his fist as the blow headed to suppress Xiao Gu. Damn you! Xiao Gu similarly looked like he had flown into a fury, and approached in anger. Boom! Because Xiao Gu was copying completely, their two fists naturally crashed into one another, generating a world-shaking boom. Celestial light surged out as if the heaven and earth were being split apart, evolving into millions of worlds. Boom! Wu Hang was sent flying from the force while drawing out an arc in the skies, blood spraying madly from his whole body. When Xiao Gu saw this, he made an ah, and also rolled backwards, forcing out blood to pour from his body. However, his body itself had been copied, so to say nothing of just bleeding a little, he would be fine even if he was beheaded. Everyone couldn't help but feel speechless. They had never seen someone so despicable. Ling Han was feeling gratified though. Xiao Gu was no longer just simply mimicking, but had already inserted some of his own performing skills. For example, in that exclamation of, ah, Wu Hang had not released such a pained cry. It was added in by Xiao Gu himself. There was improvement. Who knew, endless years later, Xiao Gu could possibly awaken his intelligence a second time, and ascend Dao once more. Meanwhile, Lu Feng's expression was filled with grief. He now knew that Wu Hang had not seen wrongly. He really was no match for Xiao Gu. Even a fifth heaven celestial king had been sent flying. Even if the strength of both sides was close to equal, suppressing him would only be the matter of a few moves. What was more terrifying was that this perhaps wasn't even Xiao Gu's full strength. Sixth heaven? Seventh heaven? Eighth heaven? Or even a supreme being of ninth heaven? Xiao, another celestial king, descended, seven-colored light entwined around him. His whole body was also brimming with the air of primal chaos. His features could not be distinguished clearly, but the pressure that came from a supreme being was rippling out. Seventh heaven celestial king. Chapter 2136. Long Yueshi dies. The Four Seas Palace had abundant wealth. When a second heaven celestial king was outmatched, a fifth heaven celestial king would immediately jump out. And when a fifth heaven celestial king was outmatched, a seventh heaven celestial king would emerge. Finally, didn't they still have an overlord like a ninth heaven celestial king? You dare interfere in the business of our Four Seas Palace? I will let you know your own measure. This seventh heaven celestial king moved decisively, and a massive palm immediately descended from the skies, pressing down on Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu naturally copied him exactly. After repeating his words, he immediately pressed out his own palm towards the other. He did not know how to dodge at all. Immediately, he was blasted solidly by the massive palm, and that seventh heaven celestial king's figure flashed, and appeared out of the attack range of this palm strike from Xiao Gu. Hong, long, long, a seventh heaven celestial king had moved. This might was really too domineering. Even if this was the rock palace, where every mountain rock was tempered to an incredibly high degree by the rock, a gigantic pit was still created from the blast, and Xiao Gu had also disappeared in this depression. Ha 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 ha, now that the spiritual mountain celestial king has moved, it is very easy as expected. That's right. The spiritual mountain celestial king has been a super monarch tier in the past, and now has hopes of attaining 8th heaven. His strength could even match some weaker 8th heaven celestial kings. To actually dare toy around with the spiritual mountain celestial king, he really was seeking his own death. The members of the Four Seas Palace were all smirking coldly. In terms of cultivation level, the spiritual mountain celestial king was ranked 3rd in the Four Seas Palace, but his strength was inferior only to Shang Jiwei. He was the 2nd strongest elite of the Four Seas Palace. If he moved personally, how many in this world would he actually be incapable of suppressing? However, the spiritual mountain celestial king did not smile. Instead, he became solemn. With a light wave, the dust and rocks that were flying in the deep pit were immediately swept away. At the bottom of the vacant pit, a person immediately appeared. It could not be called a person, but rather a bone. It was snow white and crystalline, and possessed an incredibly ancient seal, exuding an aura of age. Xiao Gu. The members of the Four Seas Palace had all seen very clearly that when Xiao Gu had flown here, he was just a bone, and now he was still a bone. What did that mean? That he had not been injured at all. Hiss, The move from a seventh heaven celestial king actually did not succeed. To call it a complete failure would be inappropriate as well. At least, the body that Xiao Gu had formed had been shattered, which had still proven how strong the spiritual mountain celestial king was. Previously, neither Lu Feng or Wu Hang had been able to do that at all. Just what exactly are you? The spiritual mountain celestial king asked in a low voice. The other's true body was just a bone, but was there such a powerful bone in this world? Just what exactly are you? Xiao Gu copied his words as he reformed his body. The spiritual mountain celestial king stared at Xiao Gu for a moment, and dismissed the thought of communicating with Xiao Gu. Whether Xiao Gu was deliberately mimicking him, or only knew how to speak through mimicry, it was clear that he could not possibly say anything valuable. Then, what was the point of wasting words? There was only one thing left to do. Battle. The spiritual mountain celestial king moved without hesitation, and began fighting Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu's expression was completely one of puzzlement. Why aren't you talking anymore? What is fun about just fighting and not talking? He dealt with the battle in a passive way, merely parrying without bothering to counter. The spiritual mountain celestial king was indeed very strong. He was an overlord among monarch tiers, his battle prowess having surpassed even 7th heaven, and advanced into 8th heaven. It should be known that there was the saying that every level of celestial king tier brought one closer to ascending the heavens. With a difference of a minor level, that meant a world of difference in strength. Regarding the saying that king tiers could be invincible among their peers, or how emperor tiers would be able to crush their opponents that were a minor level superior, that was completely useless in the celestial king tier. In truth, it was very rare that king tiers would be able to advance into the celestial king tier, unless they gained incredibly good fortune in the future. Only emperor tiers could possibly become celestial kings, and even then it was just a portion of them. It was only definite that monarch tiers could become celestial kings, and no matter what, they would become 4th heaven or 5th heaven celestial kings at least, but to speak of having tier-surpassing battle prowess, even monarch tiers could not possibly have it. Only super monarch tiers could achieve that. The spiritual mountain celestial king was one such monarch tier. His cultivation level was 7th heaven celestial king tier, but his battle prowess had reached 8th heaven celestial king tier. In fact, even among 8th heaven celestial kings, his battle prowess could place him in the middle ranks. This was too strong. To say nothing of the fact that Xiao Gu was presently muddle-headed, and did not know to counter at all, even if he rose up in resistance, it was definitely impossible that he would be a match for the spiritual mountain celestial king. This spiritual mountain celestial king could already be compared to the Black Dragon King. However, Xiao Gu had an astonishing advantage, and that was the strength of his defense was astounding. In truth, he was just a bone. If the bone was not damaged, he would be fine, and the toughness of his bone could compare to divine metals. With how tough divine metal was, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not break it by force. They could only slowly melt it down through the power of regulation. Thus, if the spiritual mountain celestial king wanted to pose a true threat to Xiao Gu, he could only use the power of regulation to refine Xiao Gu. Otherwise, it would only be wasted effort. But to accomplish this was really much too difficult. Xiao Gu had terrifyingly high accomplishments in regulations of space. No matter how the spiritual mountain celestial king trapped him, it was useless. Xiao Gu would still be able to easily break free. This caused the battle to sink into a stalemate. It was clear that the spiritual mountain celestial king was completely in an advantageous position, yet no matter how hard he tried, he could not turn his advantage into a victory. Because Ling Han was already trapped, no one made any further move on him. After all, someone had experienced a loss at his hands before. If anyone made a move on Ling Han, it would definitely force them into a dilemma. In that case, they might just as well trap Ling Han here. In the skies, for great celestial kings battled strongly. Shang Jiwei against Long Yueshi, and Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king. Both battles were incredibly intense. However, there was practically no one that could see these two battles, because these four were really too powerful. Not only were they moving at an astonishing speed, their attacks were the same as well. What others could see were actually just the halos of bright light that exploded in flashes. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time trickled by. It would be nothing strange for great battles between celestial kings to last a few years, or even tens of thousands of years. Thus, everyone was not anxious. The rock heaven had existed for countless epochs, and so what if they had to spend several or even several tens of thousands of years to exterminate it? But merely 10 days later, one battle suddenly stopped, and no further brilliant light that could dazzle the heavens surged. Which battle was it? Shangji Wei against Long Yueshi? Or Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king? In only a while, the answer was revealed. A figure suddenly dropped rapidly from the skies, and landed on the ground loudly. The two massive wings spread behind her back exuded an endless boundless might, and the skin that was exposed was covered with dragon scales. This person could not be seen clearly at all. But there was no need to see the face, and they could confirm that this person was Long Yueshi because these were the wings of the rock. Could it be that Long Yueshi had won? The members of the Four Seas Palace were all stunned, while the members of the Rock Palace were overjoyed. If the Grand Elder won, then there would be no need for the Rock Palace to be disbanded, and this would have also dealt with a strong enemy like the Four Seas Palace. In the future, the Rock Palace would be able to regain its domineering stand as a Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier force. Pang, another person flew down and landed, an ancient mirror shining brilliantly behind her. Shangji Wei. Shangji Wei, you have won, but you have also lost, Long Yueshi said. When she said the first word, her voice was still very clear, but her voice became older as she spoke the second, and the dragon scales covering her body were also falling off piece by piece. Her black hair turned gray, and then from gray it turned white. In an instant, she had turned back into an old woman. She laughed loudly, and then came to an abrupt stop. Not a single sign of life could be seen. Crack! Suddenly, a thunderous crack resounded in the heaven and earth, followed by an endless rain of blood. A lamenting sound was heard loudly, causing everyone to feel a sadness and grief rise up from the bottoms of their hearts, and when they wiped their eyes, they were filled with tears. A celestial king had died, and the heaven and earth grieved. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.